We'll start with the roll call, and we'll start with whoever's online. Jessica?
Jessica Smuin, present.
Carla Merrill, present.
Oh, good.
Jason Thielen, present.
Greg Gordon, present.
Lon Lott, present.
And Troy Stout, present. We have a full quorum. That's great. Love the wondrous age of electronics. So we'll start with a prayer by Jason Thielen.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful that we can come together as a city to discuss city issues and try to make our city as great of a place as possible. We're thankful for those who work for the city, those who protect us, both in fire and in the fire department and police department. We're thankful for their efforts and their service to us. Please bless us today, help us to understand the issues, help us to make good choices. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. I'd like to welcome our one audience member who's here physically and those who are online joining us. And that familiar voice that tells me the recording's in progress mid-sentence every meeting. I joked about the electronic age. My wife was watching an old 1970s game show, and they were talking about the electronic age when they actually had microphones they could hand to each other. So we've advanced somewhat as a race. So we're going to start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll go ahead and lead. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. See, we even have an electronic flag. All right, so tonight we're going to have a work session on the conservation easement to start our meeting. We'll probably not need to spend more than a half hour or so on that, if that. I'm not sure how much work we still have left on it, but obviously it's up to you guys to bring up the items that you're concerned about, anything you'd like to see altered from this latest version. And thanks to Steve Doxey and Craig Hall for working through this with us. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and start with, I didn't ask you this ahead of the meeting, Craig, but do you have anything to kind of summarize where we are at this point you'd like to maybe get the conversation started with?
Steve's document is about 10 days old. And he attempted to incorporate all of the discussion that we had 2 weeks ago, I guess it was. And we struggled a little bit because on some issues, we didn't know if there was a consensus of where we are going. Because when we've met individually with twos and ones and that sort of thing, we're getting different points of views. And so what we attempted to do when Steve did the drafting was sometimes to cut the baby in half. And we may have not done it correctly. But as we go through, you may see some things that you may say, like Greg may say, well, I didn't want that. Well, yeah, because we were not sure on all items where the consensus was to be. We tried to follow, we actually have a picture in our offices of what's on the board over there as like kind of our priorities. And we kind of followed, those directions because there seemed to be good consensus when we did that 2 weeks prior. Mm-hmm. And so I think we really need to look at section 3 and section 4, the permitted and not permitted. Okay. And then we would be really helpful if we got some direction on a management plan. An outline or some thoughts and some directions, because we've heard some expressed concern about, should we do the easement without the management plan, or do we have to have the management plan? And so we're a little disjointed in that arena.
On that question, the way I understand it, and I may be wrong on this, but the way I understand it is that there are two separate documents, the conservation easement and the management plan.
They can be two separate documents, and one could be an exhibit to the other.
Right. So as I understood it, we were kind of heading down the path of establishing the correct verbiage for the conservation easement itself, that makes reference to a management plan that will be named in the future. And that future could be 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now.
Right.
But the conservation easement is the first step, as long as it grants permission to the management plan to administrate. And that's kind of where we've been working. Is that?
Yeah, the key is regarding the conservation and the management plan is how much discretion, what are the things that you cannot touch that are inviolate in the conservation easement versus the management plan of everything else that is not inviolate?
So an example of that might be that it will never transfer into private ownership to be developed. Is that something, as an example, is that what you're talking about?
That's a rough example, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So.
Okay.
So as I was talking to Steve on Friday, because he left town, went to Boise, we weren't sure how to help direct this conversation tonight. I would hope that you have some areas, in particularly section 3 and 4, that you still have some concern about. Why isn't it included, or why isn't it included? So just some thoughts.
Okay. Okay. So for some reason, I can't find my copy that's being shown up on the screen, which has some of the highlights and the notations. But one of the things, and I'll maybe I can start, if that's okay, just kind of throw something out there. And I'm looking at page, this isn't breaking me down into pages, in the now therefore clauses, where it reads in the middle of, I apologize, this is probably on the 2nd or 3rd page, where the sentence is, grantor hereby voluntarily and irrevocably gifts, grants, and conveys to grantee and its successors in interest a perpetual conservation easement to be held and enforced for the benefit of the public, including the residents of Alpine City. Does that statement alone imply or create a transfer of ownership?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Well, hang on. Not transfer of all the bundle of rights. The city will still own it, subject to the easement.
Okay.
Kind of like an overlay. That's not a correct term, but it's one of the property rights. And we have all these bundle of rights. You're going to take out from your share of the bundle of rights the conservation easement right.
Okay.
The ability to develop inability to develop inconsistent with the conservation easement.
So the actual ownership remains with Alpine City.
Yes.
The actual rights and responsibilities to manage to make sure it stays and remains consistent with the values of the conservation easement are turned over to the conservation easement.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thanks.
An easement is like a water easement, the right to do something on your property.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have ownership.
Right. Okay, good. So like the easement that the power company has on my side yard, I still can plant a garden there. I can landscape it. I can play on it. I may not be able to build over it.
That's
but
correct.
I can do what I want to do as an owner with an easement. Okay, good. Thank you. Jason?
I was lost, but I wish these pages were numbered.
I know on the document that
They are
in
the
packet-
bottom right.
Well, in our packet, when you open up, maybe I'm opening the wrong thing. I might be.
It's very
I'm opening it
light.
in my email, so that's probably the problem.
I'm looking at the email and mine shows up.
It does?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's not for some reason.
Connie just verified.
Now, in the packet, when I look it up, it's numbered, but in my email, it's not. I'll look at the packet. I've already thrown away my Apple Pen tonight because it did me zero good at all to mark this thing up. So I'm just trying to remember where the places are. Does anybody else have something they want to start with as far as a question or any type of adjustments?
Maybe we go back to what Craig was saying at the very beginning with relationship to the management plan.
Yeah.
The confusion I had last time was specific to the pickleball courts, as I mentioned last time. The document without a management plan would technically allow it to be there. But Craig put in specifically, I think it was item X, if I remember correctly, that laid out that exactly thing anyway, just to put it in there, just so that there wasn't confusion. I'm guessing you kind of showed that you could put something into it and have it be very clearly spelled out.
Yes.
But then we have a management plan. My expectation was always that those type of things would sit outside that in a management plan. So the question is if we even need a management plan, or if we are going to go on management plan, this needs to be more general in nature with pointing us to the management plan if there are things that need to change. That's my confusion with it. I still don't see where the management plan comes into this whole thing based on where in this easement does it point to the management plan and say, management plan, you take over from here.
As Wendy explained a couple of weeks ago when she was here, whenever she was here last, Section 3 and Section 4 are intended to be thou shalts and thou shalt nots. And the management plan is to manage how you work with thou shalls and how you work with, again, thou shalt not. And in between, you have the ability to manage the various resources that are located within Lambert Park. I'm trying to think of a good example. Shane, I don't know the topography where the rivers or the ditches run through, but how do you operate and the ditches or the streams for flood control, for irrigation, for dun, and still be consistent with the purposes of the conservation easement? And I think that's the intent of the management plan.
Okay, so in here we have item D, which is streams and ditches, talking about our ability to control those, remove brushes, and do things to minimize the risk to the public.
Right.
Tell me how the management plan works in correlation with item D there in Section 3. Why would we need it? I'm just with relationship to the example of ditches.
I think the best example I can come up with is, let's say the weather changes and we're in a wet cycle. And in order to manage the stream flow, now I'm making this up as we go, to manage the stream flow, Shane and his public works department decide that they need to put in a retention basin. The management plan, I would say, unless it was prohibited, they could do so in order to manage the ditches and the streams and the flow.
So would item D here in Section 3, would it reference the management plan, or?
I think we need to do a better job, Jason, in outlining the purpose of the management plan and the conservation easement. Because when I left last time or the time before, after Wendy spoke, I was kind of like what you just expressed. Why, if we're specific in 3 and specific in 4, why do I need a management plan? But in talking with Steve, who has more experience in dealing with this than I do, he says the management plan is really like the day-to-day management of a resource or whatever it may be. It's not inconsistent with the general purposes and the specifics contained in this document, which is our guideline and our constitution, so to speak, for the conservation easement.
It's almost like the management plan is the set of bullet points that goes under each of these, items A through E in this case. That it's more of the detail to what this really means. But it is a fair question, I think, because really the purpose of the conservation easement is, in my mind, this is just my interpretation of it, is to maintain it as a permanent public open space in basically its natural state, which may vary from time to time based on conditions. And to guarantee that it can never transfer into ownership. I mean, this is actually a sub to that, but they could never transfer ownership to a developer or to any private enterprise that would create a development within the property. I mean, that's the most basic point, I think, that everybody wants to accomplish. And so in some ways, to Jason's point, it feels like this would be enough almost, just because it ensures those things. But whatever is allowed is allowed. And that would be up to the council or to the management of the park to create whatever we need to, as long as it stays within the guidelines established here.
I think that's true. I think for our own edification, let me call Wendy and let me get 2 or 3 examples of management plans.
Okay.
Because I think all of us here tonight, we're struggling with what the document actually is. Let me see if I can get some short ones, not huge ones. The Bridal Veil Falls one is 300 pages long. We don't want to, I've gone through it twice. Let's not go through that exercise. Let me see if I can get some examples that would help us understand what the real purpose of it is and how they marry together or work together.
Because there are examples that would be pretty close to this situation.
Oh, I think so, yes.
Draper has, I think, 3 or 4 conservation easements just right here. And there are other cities that have them in very similar areas that are mostly foot traffic, hoof traffic, or wheel traffic, bike traffic on their trails.
Because I would prefer, like in section 3, X and or W and X, specifically ask her about those 2 issues, because again, I think W is information that would ultimately be in the management plan, which is X. And if we wanted to take out, for example, pickleball courts and let that reside in the management plan at a later time where city councils can modify that, that would be great. There's public input you can receive. Do people really want it? I think people might not want it, but someone here might. And so that the management plan allows for community involvement in some of those decisions. And I just on W and X, just those a little more information on that.
Okay, I've got that.
Along with that, though, again, what we've been told is if it's not in here as a
Cannot.
as a permitted use,
Right.
then it's up to interpretation in the prohibited use that it's natural or in the existing condition, which means that there would be no pickleball courts then.
So
Interpretation in the future would be, there would be none. You
Mike?
couldn't do that.
what I think I've heard, Lon, is that if it's not prohibited, then it is allowed, as long as it doesn't violate the
Right, but that's up to interpretation then, as to, I heard Jason last 2 weeks ago say that. It's-
Right.
I would interpret it that
I
in his
interpret
words,
it that you could
could not put a pickleball court in there.
based on hardscapes, based
Right.
on natural.
Right.
Which means then that if we do up to interpretation, then if it's not spelled out, it's not gonna occur.
Well, and conversely, so I had a question on something towards the end there and some of those recitals, so I called Steve on it last week, and the question that came up while we were talking is, in one of these sections, it was kind of a long list of things that are allowed, is the idea, you know, and there were like 12 things, but maybe we were missing something in there. Let's say it was a bridge or something. And, you know, and so I asked, you know, it feels like because this list is so lengthy and exhaustive, do we run the risk now that if it was going to be included, it would have been in this long list, right? So, and Steve thought, his comment, as I understand it, was, yes, that is a potential risk. When you're very specific and then you've left something out, you know, it's implied that it wasn't included
You
in your.
specifically left it out.
Yes,
right?
and so, you know, when you might have forgotten or, so anyway, that was part of what seemed like might be a risk is if we're so specific or so detailed, but then we're not maybe future ready in a sense for things that we couldn't possibly see.
How do we overcome that?
Good drafting.
I
Yeah,
think the management plan is
Yeah.
the part that we still haven't figured out, because the management plan is what should give us flexibility, and this should reference that. I agree. I mean, you wouldn't want to have every single thing in here because it does limit, but there are some things like that are higher level, like utilities, water rights, those things need to be in here because they're at the higher level, but when they become recreational, the core uses of recreation, therein lies that ambiguity. And so how do you allow some of that to sit in the management agreement?
So this might help. I just did a search on Google. It can be dangerous, but for kind of how does the management plan work with a conservation easement? This is from an NRCS document. It says an easement management plan is an overarching plan that serves as a roadmap to guide and inform easement holders on management and conservation activities that promote the long-term viability of the land covered by the easement. So in the management plan section, Steve referenced the rodeo master plan, and there was one other document, I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, the Bowery.
Yeah, the Bowery. So those are specific plans that are in place right now. Austin and I reviewed the Bowery master plan the other day, and what we believe was adopted back then, I'm not 100% sure the council wants that to happen. There's multiple campsites up there and some different things that kind of take up the meadow area below the Bowery and above it. And I didn't remember it being adopted that way, but Austin kind of researched some minutes. There's a little bit of question if it actually ever got adopted by the city council. It did go through planning commission, but if you changed kind of your master plan for that area, I think that could be updated in the living document of the management plan so that the easement holder, this seems like a logical explanation, so that the easement holder knows the details of how you're managing that part of the property within those values established in the easement.
So within that management plan, the city could at one point determine that there's no camping in the Bowery, but at another time, they may say there is camping. You know, maybe it's too dry and people are, you know, fire hazard, those kinds of things, and then we go through a different weather cycle and we want to open it back up. That's the latitude that is allowed within the management plan.
We need to verify with Steve, but I think that's the purpose of that management plan.
Yeah.
Because things change over time, and
Oh,
I see it almost as like documentation of we're doing this, and we believe it falls within the guidelines of the easement or something like that. It's almost like justification for what you're doing.
Yeah, well, and as I understand it too, we have the ability to change the management periodically as we see fit. Whereas the conservation easement is kind of the framework, it's the steel construction, and the management plan allows us to move around a little bit.
That's how I understand it.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Just my understanding is the easement defines the core values. I'm not looking at the whiteboard, but something to the effect of the recreation, never to be sold or developed. And then the management plan goes into those fluid or living decisions, like let's take camping. That's a perfect one. If you look at camping, whether we allow camping or don't allow camping, that doesn't change the core values of the easement. It doesn't infringe on the core values of the easement. So as long as the core values of the easement are defined and agreed upon, then the management plan would then take into account the modifications or adjustments that would need to be made, as long as they align to those core values.
Yeah. And which I think Lon has made the point before, that a simple document makes more sense to you, right? I mean, it would be nice if we could have a conservation easement that just basically outlined our principles, and then the management plan took over everything from there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of work done on this document the way it is, but I'm not sure we're gonna go back to that point, but what we want is those core values to be maintained no matter what, right? And the management plan, as long as it doesn't violate those, should be a fairly fluid document. But it's also been mentioned by Jason, which I totally agree with it. There are certain things that you want to make sure you're locking in. The protection of our resources and ongoing ability to expand those if necessary and to maintain them. And so, yeah, we want to be very specific about those things to ensure that the city is always in the position that it needs to be. Carla, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, no, from what I remember when we spoke with Steve last time, that his general idea for the conservation easement was to keep it simple and basic, kind of going with the core values. And then it's the management plan that went into the details, or that delved into it, that would give us the flexibility to add those things. So I don't know if we've gone away from that in detailing everything in section 3 and section 4, or I guess I kind of wanted to pick Steve's brain, and because when he mentioned it before in our city council meeting, I thought it was brilliant the way that he had it set up, that would give us the maximum flexibility that we needed, or that we would need for the future of Lambert Park. And then but if we state our core values to what we absolutely do not want, that would be the best way for the city to position the conservation easement and present it. Did anyone else get that impression from Steve?
Craig raised his hand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're struggling about how much detail goes in which document.
Yeah. So is it unreasonable to, or is it even practical to take, say, many of these points and say, these are now going to become part of the management plan. The conservation easement itself protects the land as a public recreational space in perpetuity with, and it's easy to get down the rabbit hole with a lot of these details where they should belong, but without taking too many steps backward in the process, could some of this just be translated directly over to a management plan?
I think the answer is yes. Maybe an exercise that Steve and I ought to go through next week is to weigh the core values, i.e. the board and what we put in the document, versus the specific allowances and specific prohibitions, and maybe come up with a list of yes, no, maybe.
Yeah.
And then look for your direction. I was just I was just saying balance 3 and 4 against the core values. That's just a thought that came to me.
Yeah, and you know, maybe one specific example is L, noxious weed control. You know, it talks about a de minimis way for, you know, except for Phragmites, which I don't think we have there, in particular Phragmites australis, right?
Yeah.
You know, and that seemed like something we could put in a management plan. And then somewhere else in here, it talks about that you can use chemical weed control.
Yeah, it's the third line down.
Is it this one?
Yeah, it's an L.
Yeah, and but there's somewhere else in here, it talks about, I think, mechanical control. But it's not in here, so that's kind of another case where I worry, you know, it's specifically blocked here, but then doesn't mention in other spots, and I worry some of that complexity might catch us.
I don't know about you guys, but I often lay awake and I worry about Phragmites. They freak me out.
I'm sorry.
And Lambert.
I don't think we'll ever have Phragmites in Lambert Park.
I don't know what Phragmite is.
Utah
Go
Lake.
along the
Serious-
shore of
serious
Utah
problem.
Lake.
Okay.
Serious
Yeah,
problem in
right.
Utah Lake.
They have big, beautiful blooms at the top.
Oh,
I'll
yeah,
fight
those.
with it.
All right, I know what you're talking about then. Yeah, I mean, that seems like those things are fluid enough to adapt. We need fluidity to adapt to whatever comes up. I mean, if we do suddenly come up with a noxious weed problem up there, that we can address it, that seems like a management plan issue.
Yeah. Well, the takeaway I've got from tonight is, number one, get some copies of some simple management plans. Number two, balance 3 and 4 prohibitions and permitted uses against the core values. And then redraft accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the language in this document goes to waste. It may just
No.
move to a different sheet of paper.
Yeah.
And then we have more simplified conservation easement. Carla, is that what you're kind of aiming at?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody here have comments to the contrary or concerns with that?
I'll just say that I like what Craig said.
Yeah.
We'll go through all of them and we'll spell them out and then we can discuss them individually. You know, we brought up pickleball course as an example of how the whole thing works. We may be unanimous that we don't want that in there, or maybe
Yeah.
we may, and based on that, that determines, you know, I agree with you. A lot of these things will still stay in this conservation easement document, but there are some things that should come out of it and should point to the management document and give us a template of how to use that document with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need a little more education, frankly.
Yep.
Me included.
And just for the record, to me, pickleball courts, sorry, Carla, seem like a little bit of a violation of the core values because it creates an artificial surface that isn't really consistent with the natural stuff that we're after in the park. And that's my own perspective, but yours may differ. Same thing with concrete paths, things like that. We have other areas of town where those things go very well. They don't necessarily go well in that space.
Well, I don't know. I thought we talked about at least an asphalt walking path that goes parallel to Box Elder Drive for safe walking routes for the kids to get to the bus. So, I mean,
Okay. Yep, that's perfectly legitimate.
Or to go to the
poppies.
Poppies.
Yeah. Yeah, we did talk about that as well. I stand corrected. Okay, other thoughts, Lon?
No, well, I mean, there's still several things, but if you pull these things, if we continue working on this, like we're talking about it, it may resolve a few things. One question I did have on J, leases. What is considered a management lease? What is it the cell tower thing specifically that is referring to in that? Let's see.
That's one example. Which paragraph you looking at? Mark?
J,
Okay,
under leases,
right.
and would that be, again, part of a management type plan type thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Was that you put in there just for the cell tower, or there are other leases that would
Yeah.
be included? I don't know.
So,
But I
so my
like that.
question is, what is considered this lease? What are we thinking a lease is?
Yeah. It does seem like it would be specific to the cell tower, because that's really all we have there now. And the other possibility though could be the rodeo grounds, you know, if we want to put it under a lease to the rodeo club or, you know, whatever may be appropriate.
What if we leased it to a group for a race for one day, a mountain bike race or something? I don't know, is that?
I
Would
would
that apply?
character lease seems to be, in my mind, a long-term
Long-term,
engagement
okay.
with,
Yeah.
Not a rental
Yeah.
or
it'd be.
temporary.
Yeah,
usage.
temporary or rental agreement or a use agreement that's 24 hours long or whatever.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
So that was one that just sort of fits in a management type thing.
Yeah.
We do have a few non-city utilities like
Okay.
I
Are
think
those
gas,
Leases or easement?
well, they're easements, but I'm just thinking here,
Does the gas go through there?
I
Did it
believe
head to
it
the
does go through up to Box Elder. If I remember
Okay.
right. And then I know there's fiber and power that go through the lower parking lot and up to the cell tower in an easement.
Okay.
And then I did see that the DNR aspect is cleaned up. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Craig, on M, problem or diseased animals. Grantor may use legal methods to control diseased and problem animals as permitted by state and federal laws, just as simple as that then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, I'm good.
deer control,
Yeah.
bobcat.
However, however we want to do, because we could implement a urban deer control based on what DNR would like us to do, a catch and release and set some traps up in there, but we would need to be able to set some traps.
Yeah, and that is a possibility. Although the last time we trapped, it was on private land because we wanted them to live up there. But-
Right, but I'm
But
saying if that's
just as an
where
example.
DNR is saying, here's our best, here's the path, or because the private land was where they were more problematic.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
But that would allow us to do whatever they say, right?
Yeah. I don't think it would prohibit it.
Okay.
You can continue if you'd like, Lon.
Hold on.
Okay. Greg, did you have anything else?
Nothing else, thanks.
Jessica?
Nothing else.
Okay. Carla?
Nope, I'm just waiting for Craig's, what he talked about, getting us kind of like a punch list of yes or no for the management document.
Okay. Jason, did you have anything else you'd like to address now? Okay. Craig?
We'll go forward. So
Okay.
Steve will be back on Monday and we'll jump on it.
Sounds good. Okay, thanks, everybody.
So just to follow up on one thing here, on where we go from here.
Yeah.
If, this was gonna come up later, but the November 23rd city council meeting, the mayor has asked to move that to the 30th off of the Thanksgiving week. So if there is going to be any public hearing or anything like that, we need to know so that we can meet our notice requirements.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and notice that. We'll make it a public hearing.
And then I guess the planning commission meeting is the 16th, which doesn't affect any
Of November?
notice of November.
Yeah.
So,
But we could, I guess, and this was kind of something that was occurring to me, Shane, as we kind of look at possibly reformatting the document. I think it's important to maintain continuity within the meat of the document. And so that, I guess what I'm getting at is the planning commission, as they review it, that they have everything in front of them, whether it's going to be on the management plan or the core agreement. And that, I guess what I'm thinking is, it's all here. Now we're trying to determine, and I say that with, I know that there's going to be some adjustments made, but the meat of it is here. It just depends on which piece of paper it ends up on, that the planning commission will actually review for their purposes. Does that make sense?
It does, but we're being over optimistic that I can turn a document on Monday, to be honest with you, for the planning commission
Well,
review it Tuesday night.
yeah.
I just don't think that is practical.
But that's part of my point, Craig, is I guess I'm not making my point very well. The document that they do have now, or that they will have, is comprehensive.
Yeah.
And they may feel strongly about one thing maybe belonging somewhere else, but we're already in the process of doing that. So everything that we're considering is within the document that they're looking at. Does that make sense? It's a little more complex than it might be at the end, but it includes everything that we're talking about.
yeah, so I guess my question is, it's like an order of operation question, really. Does the document need to be final in the council's eyes for the planning commission to make a recommendation as per our ordinance, make a recommendation to the city council and hold that public hearing? Because that's the only required public hearing. Based on our.
The
based
planning
on-
commission. Right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, some other matters, it's, we're gonna, it's a bad example because we're talking about not doing this, but let's say it's not Lambert Park, we're gonna sell a little piece of some other piece of property the city owns that's deemed open space. That defined item would go to the planning commission. They would make a recommendation to hold a public hearing, make a recommendation to the city council, and then the city council would be required to have a 4/5 supermajority vote for it to move forward. And so I don't know.
I think the best practice is to get it to the planning commission in quasi final form, and we're not there. I think it's unfair to the planning commission if we give them a document that we're going to tear apart.
Yeah.
So I think this is procedural, and Shane, I try to stay out of procedural, but I think it's premature to go to the planning commission on the 16th.
Well, it's like a different animal than the example I just used. Like, it's the little piece of sliver of property that the city's gonna sell, in theory, is a defined thing.
Pretty simple.
And it's being put before the planning commission, and it's very visible what's gonna happen. And this has a lot of moving parts that are still being massaged and worked on. And so I'm bringing it up as much of it as a question.
No, it's a really
procedural
good question. It is, because we don't want to put the cart before the horse. What do you guys think about it?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
That's just,
I think we have to see how the management plan works into this. And that's my biggest thing. And because I think the best thing, what we're missing right now is for our, yeah, it's frustrating because I wish we would have been here already. We need to have a conservation easement that lays out our principles, our values, our principles. But we need part of the discussion is what's allowed in, to the point of pickleball course, to the point of a paved path to here, or paved paths in there, or those are more of the discuss, because I agree with actually a lot of, almost the entire thing. I think it's really the document. I think the document is good. until you get into the details. And the details are where, I mean, if at least we had a core document that referenced the management plan, that showed us how we could use that management to maneuver and provide input from the city on it, that would be great. But to where I'm at right now, I still don't see that, how that even plays into the whole thing is my concern after. Because the same things we're talking about right now, we talked about 2 weeks, which is me asking, hey, how does the management plan work into this whole thing?
Right.
And this is the same question we're asking right now. And we're really not any closer.
Yeah.
From that 2 weeks into it right now.
Well, and Lon, I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds from past conversations with you, you favor simplicity and fluidity, right? The ability to maneuver as needed, but also a simple document that's easy to understand. And so I'm assuming that sounds like a better plan to you to pare this document down to the skeletal form that guarantees all of those things, all the values long-term. And then the management plan is something that we can spend time creating that will allow us to bob and weave as needed.
Yeah, fair enough. One thing on the planning commission though is it's interesting the direction we're going with this one, in that we're sort of telling them what we want them to say okay to. We're not getting their input like we would typically do on an ordinance. They would vet out all these different things. They would come to us with their ideas of what it is that would fit best in this, and this category.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would throw it back at them and say, well, we sort of like that, or we don't like that. But it seems like we're saying, here's this, now tell us, yes, you want it, so that we can say yes to it. I see the planning commission as taking it then and making some corrections if those 7 people see things with some different eyes as well. Because that's what we're counting on. We're counting on our planning commission to give us a good recommendation on certain things. And if that's how they see it. So yeah, you should get it to a fairly reasonable point and get it to them so that then they can dissect it and look at it and go through public hearings. And if it takes more than 1 public hearing, so be it. But get it dissected a little bit more by 7 more people so that we can see some of the holes that there might be there. So yeah, the planning commission almost on this one seems like they're only taking a role to say yes or no to something we've said, this is what we want. And I think they need to have some input as well as far as how they see it.
Well, to that point, perhaps they don't need the finished document to address it in their next meeting. They could take a look at what we have so far and give us some input on that, knowing that that's not going to be when they're going to have their public hearing. That could be the beginning of their process to publicly evaluate it. And even if it means we're going to give them a pared down version of it later, because I think we've agreed here that most of the language here either belongs in the conservation easement or the management plan, and they may have some opinions on which one to go where. So if they're allowed the opportunity to evaluate it the way things are now, doesn't mean they can't do it again when we simplify the document a little bit. So I would at least promote giving them the chance to look at it in their next meeting, whether it's, and Craig, if you can come up with a revised version in that period of time, fantastic. If you can't, then we still have a document to give to them to evaluate and get the feedback on.
And I think they already have this version, don't they, Shane?
Yeah.
Didn't we give it to them for last Tuesday?
So they didn't have a meeting.
I know,
last
but did a
It was
packet go out
released.
yet? Okay, I misspoke then.
But we do have a public hearing scheduled for the 16th. Why not? I might
But-
correct on that.
Yeah, we do have a public hearing scheduled, and the 10-day-old document that Steve drafted, they have had a copy of that in their
Right.
possession.
That's what they've had.
Okay.
Yeah. So they've had a chance to be familiar with at least the core.
I'm gonna send an email to Steve tonight or in the morning, ask him to attend the planning commission.
Great.
So,
I think what Lon said, I mean, I'm thinking back to the Bowery master plan. The planning commission developed it. They came up with an A and B proposal, sent those to city council. City council says kind of blend the two. And then it went back to them to make those changes. And that's where I was saying, I don't think it did go back to them, but I don't think that came to city council. So.
Okay.
But yeah, it's almost a reverse of that, and that's where it's felt. I don't know that the way the open space ordinance was written anticipated something like this. It's more, to develop a master plan, send to city council, they might make some changes, they might have a little difference of opinion, and then the city council adopts it, so.
Well, and I think this
they'll
is,
work through it.
this is like a lot of things we do with the planning commission, Lon, is that we state the objective. Here's what we want to accomplish.
Of course.
And maybe here's a start to the document. Please go through your processes to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. It's not a matter of whether we should or shouldn't, or whether the reasons or the motivations are agreeable to them. It's here's what we want to accomplish. So here's the opportunity for the planning commission to evaluate how it matches up with our ordinances and the requirements that we have as a council to make that kind of a decision. So that's the admonition I would give to the planning commission is moving forward. This is something that council is choosing to do. Their input is requested and encouraged. But it's not necessarily a whether we should do it or at all or not. It's something we want to accomplish. Just like, lowering the light pollution in town might be, or the noise ordinances, things like that. We want to accomplish an end that meets our preferences.
And I would agree with Lon, but I do agree, like with the Bowery, for example, we didn't go to them and say, hey, come up with a Bowery master plan for us. Basically, Austin, the city came with them to master plan. They then looked at it and they said, what do we want to change? This is kind of the same thing. We're coming up with that initial thing to send over to them that includes the conservation purpose, the conservation values. And I would agree wholeheartedly. Our message to this planning commission will be to thoroughly look at this and see with these values and purposes that we're trying to get here, how is this, do you have advice on how to word it, what to add, what to remove? I mean, I'm open to all that. That's what we want. But to that point, we have to get it to the point where we can send it over, which still is my concern with the conservation easement and the management agreement. I just still feel like part of the planning commission discussion, unless we just do it one time or multiple times, is to say, what would we suggest putting in the management plan? Because then they'll come back to us and we can make a decision like, you know what? I like these things, but I don't like these things. And then we can have a discussion and modify that. But my fear is if we give it over to them right now, without the management plan, understanding it all in it, they're not going to know what to do in the same way I kind of don't know how to address just a couple of these examples that we brought up.
And that is one concern I have, because the planning commission is going to get this document that the council's worked on for several months, and they're hit cold with it. They may not have the attorney there and have that benefit of the question and answer and back and forth. And what does this mean?
Yeah.
They've had no background in the preparation of the document. That's going to be a little bit of a challenge.
And I don't disagree with that, Shane. And that's why I think, Craig, if we are able to get Steve to attend that meeting and they have the document that is available to them now, at least they'll have a lot of information. It may not be in its final format because we were looking at two different documents now, creating two different documents out of the one, but at least they'll have the meat of it and be able to begin evaluating it. And, it'll probably take another meeting to evaluate it after that. But
I'm afraid if we don't have legal counsel there, that there's going to be a lot of questions and stuff won't be able to answer.
Craig, do you feel like that's a likelihood to have Steve there?
I've already written it down, asked Steve to go to planning and zoning. I'm going to send him a text right now and see what he says.
Thank you. Okay, good. Well, we spent some time on this evening. I think we've made progress, at least at what we want to accomplish. So let's look toward the next meetings to see if we can get there. Let's move on with our agenda tonight, beginning with the consent calendar. Lon, you're the go-to consent calendar guy. Do you
Yeah, I
have
made
any
a
thoughts?
few changes on the minutes, just very few this time, but I make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
And there is the added item
Added.
from the, just making sure.
Up on the chairs.
Yeah, that's next Wednesday, the 17th. We're scheduled to have all these chairs replaced and these other purple chairs here. So the match, these chairs up here seem like they were still in good shape.
Yeah.
These are showing some wear and everything.
Can we get some red chairs, you think?
When they win again.
We could throw everyone off, put one red chair out there somewhere and everybody, what is that?
Can that be my permanent chair for when I attend the meetings in the future? All right, so,
And
Okay.
the intent with these being declared surplus, we'd probably sell them. I think there's, I had the ladies count them up today. I think there's 98 of these and 5 of these swivel chairs over here. I'm not sure how we'll do it yet. Probably on public surplus. We might do them in groups of 5 or 10, or I don't know how, but we just need to get them declared surplus. We can sell them.
And these new chairs are going to be stackable.
They are.
Right?
Yeah. If you've seen the chairs in my office, they're very similar to those.
okay, we have a motion by Lon. Do we get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Greg Gordon. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Hi.
Any
Hi.
opposed?
Aye.
Okay, sounds unanimous. Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to public comment. If anybody in the audience would like to come forward and make any comments on items that are not on the agenda for the evening. If you have a comment on an agenda item, I'll be happy to call on you when we discuss that agenda item. But otherwise, if you'd like to come forward, announce your name and your address, and please take no more than 3 minutes for your comments.
Hi, I'm Amanda Collins, address 1593 Rosanna Lane. So I was just going to ask a question. We this last year put up temporary barricades in the road between Moyle and Box Elder, the new Box Elder neighborhood. And so I just wanted to know how we were going to snowplow that road. In the lawsuit, it says Alpine City be ordered to maintain the secondary access road in a manner that would allow emergency vehicles, including fire ladder trucks, to traverse the road year round. And since we get a lot of snow up in that side, I want to know how we are going to keep that neighborhood safe by keeping it plowed.
Thank you, Amanda, and I'll answer that question. You can take over as well. Shane, those bollards are removable and the snow plows can remove them to plow the road and then put them back in.
Yeah, and if we have to remove them to do it, we will, but likely what we would do is plow up to them and then push the snow off the road. And then if we had to bring a different piece of equipment up there to clean right in front of them, we would.
Okay, perfect.
We have talked about it.
Yeah.
We can come in from the north and the south if necessary too, so.
Okay, follow-up question. So does that need to be put into the maintenance or the
Management plan?
management plan?
That's a good.
No.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I don't know exactly where it is, but and the answer to your question is yes. I believe that part of the plan, Craig, refers to our legal obligations,
Right.
that they will be maintained and held up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also part of that, sometime this fall, we'll probably be in there with a grader, just regrading the
Yeah.
road base like we've tried to each fall. I think we missed last fall, but it was still
So dry that it didn't matter.
passable. And,
Yeah.
We got some moisture.
Yep.
Right
Yeah.
now.
Yep.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan House, 688 Canterbury Lane. I'm curious, first question about cell towers in Lambert Park. So there is one today. Are there plans for additional cell towers?
We actually have an ordinance that states there will be no more cell towers in Lambert Park.
Music to my ears.
We took care of that several years back.
That's great. Second question. So I understand there's a lot of like gang violence that's kind of happening. People are going around destroying mailboxes and other things, smashing pumpkins and things. It's sort of like I've heard it's a gang thing. I don't know if that's true, but I'm curious if there's any sort of plan or, actions to be taken against that, because it seems like it's getting worse.
Yeah, and I'll field that question too. And anybody who wants to add to it, totally fine. About a year ago, we had discussions with our police chief, Chief William. At the time, there were some people that had blown up some toilets in our restrooms and created some other physical damage to our city properties. And up to that point, we had been, when we found those people, we required them to provide restitution and then, basically forgiveness if they were sorry. That's oversimplifying it. They went through more than that. But in the end, they weren't really paying the price. And we had conversations with the police chief and requested that they be prosecuted now to the full extent of the law. That was announced in the newsletter in November. And that's what we intend to do. If we can catch people doing that, we will prosecute them. As far as it being gang related, I'm not sure I could speak to that accurately. My assumption is that it's not gang related because it's been going on for, millennia. What do you think?
I haven't heard anything. I mean, every fall during pumpkin season, there's smashed pumpkins all over. There has been for as long as I've been around. So I've not been made aware of anything.
And the mailboxes, that is absolutely a crime. In fact, I think it's a federal crime. Steve, am I right there? That
I don't think so.
a mailbox is not a federal? Oh, I thought it was. Okay.
It may be, but not to my knowledge.
Okay, but it's a crime, and then people do things to mailboxes historically, and yeah, we'd love to catch who it is. But I haven't talked to the chief lately to see if anybody has been caught. Have you, Shane?
No. We can ask at our meeting tomorrow morning.
We do. We have a meeting
He
tomorrow.
won't be there. He's at a conference, and I haven't met our volunteer.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have to follow up though.
Well, thank you for all you're doing too.
Thank you.
Mayor, I might indicate also damage to property that is called criminal mischief, and depending on the value of the item that is destroyed, it can be a misdemeanor or a felony.
Okay, I just thought that since it was a federal or the postal system, that was actually postal property. At least that's what I've been told. You
I've
can't.
heard that too, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the individual mailboxes are, certainly the group mailboxes like that I've got in my neighborhood where there's 8 or 10 or 15 boxes there instead of the individual homes probably would be.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else? All right, then we'll move along with our meeting. Reports and presentations. Utopia, come on up.
Thanks for having me here. My name is Roger Timmerman. I'm the executive director of Utopia Fiber. I'm wondering if I can actually plug into one of these things and present. Does this work?
yeah, you should be able to.
We're going to go for that. This will pop up. See if we got good luck. All right, that looks like a presentation, so. My display. Looked good for a second.
It's like poltergeist right now.
And I can talk through it if I need to, but sometimes it's nice to have some pictures. Well,
Is it something you can email to Austin? Is it like a PowerPoint or something?
yeah, I can give you a USB key too. That's
Want to try that?
that's usually a
Yeah,
quicker, easier
that.
thing.
Try it on this computer, yeah.
In a folder called Alpine.
Austin, is YouTube still on then? If that happened last time? Did to kick it off.
This might be working, I can't. It's cutting off the top, I need to go into presentation mode. Let's see.
YouTube looks like it's still running.
Okay.
Well, I can flip through these, I guess. This will work. So anyways, let me give you just a quick background on Utopia. I'm not a business, I'm not selling you anything. I think it's important to know Utopia Fiber is a public entity or an interlocal entity. So when you're talking about Utopia, we're cities. It was created by cities. My boss is a bunch of people from cities, or city managers, mayors, whatever, whoever those cities want to represent them with our board. And originally it was 11 cities. The list there on the screen shows the originals. And then, things were rough for a number of years. But we turned things around and we've had a lot of success. And there's a nice model that we have for new partnerships and growth. As an oversimplification of that is we let new cities partner with us and get all the good and none of the bad. And that may seem overly or happy or optimistic, but there's a lot of truth to that. We benefit through economy of scale. And there's not really an expectation that cities go and pay for past projects or shortfalls, but we actually have a really good track record for the last 10 years of basically a perfect track record of projects that have been sustainable. They pay for themselves from subscriber revenues. There's no cost to the cities. So when we got a bunch of new city partners, you say, well, what does that do? What do we? Let's see, arrows aren't working here. That just kind of shows our network map. This is a video, and I don't know if that's going to work. So we'll try it real quick. I think sound works through this. Let's see. I don't hear any sound, so all right, we'll just skip the video. I'll send you a link if you want to see our little video, but basically it's references from other cities and how we've done with them. This is a quick timeline. So again, we know there was some history with Utopia in the early years where it struggled. But in 2009, we created the Utah Infrastructure Agency, which is basically phase 2 of Utopia. And since that time, we've done over $330 million worth of fiber projects in a lot of cities. And all of those are paying for themselves with no cost to those cities. And just people who want service sign up, and that is the money we use to pay for those projects. So we've had a lot more in size and in duration of success than we do of failures. And I would even say those were really failures. I mean, they brought a critical service to these cities, got things up and running, but it was a little bit ahead of its time. Things are a little different now with streaming video and demand. Obviously we've seen skyrocketing demand for broadband, as well as the normal options that are out there falling further behind meeting that demand. I just got to throw this up there. It's like, well, sometimes we get hit with tough questions, and I'm just going to go ahead and ask it. Is Utopia some anti-competitive overreach of government? That's something we hear. It's like, no. This is a pro-private sector thing, right? We build the roads and we let the private companies come in and use those. So it's a lot like roads. It's a lot like airports. You build an airport and you let the private companies come in and use it. And if you don't do that, you don't really have any options. And sometimes you'll end up with a monopoly or duopoly. That's what we have in broadband in most cities in Utah. We come in, we build those fiber roads, and that brings in, I need to update this slide because we're up to 15 service providers now. And you get incredible competition, good quality service. So just the comparisons here with roads, with airports, that's what an airport looks like, brings in lots of competition. We bring in a fiber network and all these companies come in and they can then offer services to the residents and businesses in the city. But it's not just about internet. We build these networks for the cities. We are the cities. And so this becomes the way you connect your facilities, your public safety offices, your parks, your water. We do a lot of smart city applications. It becomes your own system, as well as meeting the needs of your residents and businesses. I'll skip through some of this kind of quickly. A couple things, this is built to carrier grade. We don't do any micro trenching, we don't tear up your roads. It is a big construction project, but we do it It's hardened. It's done with horizontal directional drilling, which basically is a hole in a hole, and you drill between those holes. And we pull the conduit fiber underground. So there's very little disturbance to your roads and your sidewalks and driveways and things like that. It's also fully redundant. It's put things in larger structures. It runs indefinitely if there's power outages and other things. I mean, the other options like cable and DSL wireless will conk out after about 4 hours of power outage. Our stuff will run indefinitely because we hook it up to generators and gas lines, things like that. It does cost a little more to do it that way, but this is a critical service. I'm going to skip. There's a lot of questions you could ask me, so that's why I got a ton of hidden slides. If you ask me a specific question, I might go to some slide. This is just an example of some of those other things that we do. We're the #1 air quality sensor provider in the state. So whenever we build a fiber network, we throw in air quality sensors because that's the obstacle, right? The applications are enabled by connectivity. So you can actually just look at maps across Utah and look at where there's air quality data and almost pick out which cities are Utopia Fiber's built out cities based on the number of sensors in those cities. So that's one example. We got lots of smart city examples. Another one I wanted to bring up was this. We have the Early Detection Wildfire Imaging Network. This was a project we did with BYU. We install thermal cameras that pan over high-risk areas. And this automatically detects. We actually have 2 detection systems running in parallel. One is a histogram-based analysis. Another one's an artificial intelligence analysis of the images. And we detect an alarm on wildfires. So put those in urban interface areas where your homes are coming up against, high-risk areas. And that's just, it's actually available. You log in the website today and look at the different cameras we have. We've got them in Woodland Hills, Layton, Murray, South Salt Lake. We're doing installations in Orem, Brigham City, Morgan, Payson. We have a whole bunch of installations planned. These are just things that are enabled when you have connectivity. So
How big does the fire have to be, out of curiosity, to be detected?
depends how far away you are from the camera.
Okay.
We kind of say about the size of a car if we have the camera about 2 miles away from it.
Okay.
So it could potentially do better than that, but it's kind of the thresholds you set. There's a lot of configuration and managing false positives and things like that. And and we get false alarms. I mean, if the sun comes into view, it's like, okay, crud, that kind of throws things off. So it's a work in progress, but it's a super cool system, and there's a lot of excitement behind that.
So with just a question, with Woodland Hills, how many of these sensors are?
Well, the magical thing about these is once you install them, there's never any fires. It's just like, come on now.
We'll take 6, please.
Maybe we should do it. So they haven't had any fires in Woodland Hills since we put it in 2 years ago. I mean, that was the first one we put in because they had the big fire that came up. So that was kind of like, hey, let's put this in and see if it's a workable technology, if it's useful. And same thing, it seems like all the other ones we put in, we've been able to turn them on to like see fires and have it detect in city fires. So like when a building catches on fire, but we still haven't had a wildfire pop up in the field of view of these cameras. But they cover a pretty big area. I mean, we do these ones that pan over an area. So basically you can cover all of Alpine with one camera if there's a tower or a building that has line of sight to those areas. Doesn't have to be close. In fact, we actually need it to be a couple of miles away so they can see those areas.
Interesting.
So do you just have one in Woodland Hills?
Yep.
Sounds like right on top
Yeah,
of the
and
cell tower that'll go in here.
And it covers Elk Ridge, and it covers, even Timpanogos, you could see it but that one would need to be a fire the size of a bus or something to detect, right? I mean, it's the whole kind of field of view and distance and all that affects it. So, an area like Alpine, we'd be good with one, but the goal is to put about 20 to 30 of them across the Wasatch front and the Wasatch back. And that's our goal. And we're just kind of doing them one piece by piece. They're not cheap, but the bigger obstacle isn't so much buying the camera, installing it, is we got to have connectivity. So these are fiber connected, they're always on, they're always running. There's no processing happening at the camera. We pull all those feeds back to computing resources that can do all this analysis, notifications.
And when there's an alarm, I mean, we've got a Slack integration, so I get these little alerts and it shows me, hey, there's a suspected fire. Again, it's like, it's highly experimental. We're constantly tweaking this thing and fine tuning it and working with researchers at BYU. And it's a work in progress, but already our first responders are like, yeah, even though the alerts are kind of hit or miss, the images are great. They're like, oh, we got a report of a fire. And they pull it up on their phone and see both an optical version and the thermal version of that view live on their camera, on their phone. And super cool application. So anyways, it's not a presentation on that, but but it is a cool thing. At the end of this, it's like, even if you had no interest in fiber to the home, you're like, fooey with that. We are working with some cities that aren't doing fiber to the home with us on doing those installations. So it's not that, like, we would like to do that if that was of interest. But we would have to figure out how to get fiber to the location. Anyways, there's a whole bunch of other stuff we could talk about with Smart City, but I'm gonna go past that and kind of get to the chase here. So the main thing that we do is fiber to the home. We build fiber to every business, every home, gets that availability, and it's awesome. It's dedicated connections. You get your pick of service providers. You pick an option, an internet provider, and you don't like them, you just switch. And there's no installation, there's no work. It's all just, we just configure it and it changes. So there's no contracts, you can switch. It's highly competitive, and on our website, it's basically like a shopping cart. You go in there and pick which provider and options and sign up. And if you don't like them, you just switch. It's better than anything you got today. It's the fastest in the country. It's 10 gigabit enabled every location. Most people sign up for 1 gig, but there's some people who want bragging rights and they sign up for the 10 gig option. It's not shared. Even other fiber providers slow down during peak hours, and it is a shared architecture, and ours is not. It's all dedicated capacity. Let's see here, and this is just kind of what it looks like. It's kind of hard to read here, but this is a list of the options. So what happens is we charge $30 a month, and that pays for the fiber infrastructure. And then you pick a provider in the tier of service you want. And it's kind of hard to read because there's so many options. But the all-in is over here on the right column here. It's kind of the summary. Like, basically you get a 250 megabit symmetrical connection, unlimited use for about $65 a month, all in. No contract, no installation, just $65. You don't like it, you can't see it. Gigabit's a little bit more, and 10 gig is a little bit big of a step up there. That's for the power users, or those whose business will pay for their home internet connection and they don't care. They're just like, I want it. So it's pretty good and pretty competitive. We do find in little pockets here and there, you might see a fiber provider or somebody offering something that might be a little bit less, and then they say, yeah, but I hate CenturyLink, or I hate whoever this provider is. The quality of service, reliability, Utopia is unmatched. It's awesome. We'll talk a little bit about that, but we're really highly rated, also in partnership with the providers. This is kind of reference to that. We do customer service survey, a third party, at a net promoter score of 64. We've done that year over year. I'm kind of hover around 63, 64, which is the best in the industry in Utah. And so we're really highly rated. That's basically a survey of like, how likely are you to recommend a service to someone else? You've probably answered that question on a ton of surveys before, and they're trying to calculate that net promoter score. These are some other metrics. So we're number one in a lot of categories. So we're the largest open access network. Open access is that model of public infrastructure with the private providers that use it. We're the fastest in the country. So 10 gig residential, 100 gig business. We're the most competitive, meaning we've got the most options on the menu, right? 15 providers. Last year, we were the number one awardee from UETS. So we connected more schools than anyone else last year. We provide more air quality sensors than anyone else. We were number one smart city solution provider. So that's with all of these different things of sensors and hooking up SCADA systems and smart irrigation and all the stuff. We have a smart cities team in-house that builds and supports those applications. And so basically the way we see our interaction with the city is we're your department, like we're your fiber department, we're your smart city department, and we're here and available to work for you. If you already have IT people, that's great. We love working with them. But we kind of enhance that capability as if you were a large city with lots of resources. That's what we are. We're an interlocal of cities, and we kind of pool our resources, and we all benefit from that. Couple other words.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yep.
So it is the model structured such that, you know, our liabilities, expenses, revenues are local, or is it part of the collective, right? So
Yes.
okay.
Some of both. So yeah, this just shows our growth. Let me get to that, the structure, okay? Because it's like, it's not all free, right? You're joining a partnership, and there is a catch. So this is the generic vanilla agreement, and our proposal with Alpine is not this. And I'll go into, you know, we tweak this and say, this is the specific for your city and how it applies. Normally we'll come in here and say, this is what we do. We come in, we do everything on the left. So we finance it. So the Utah Infrastructure Agency issues debt, and it builds it, and it pays for it, and it collects revenues from customers and pays off those debts, and pays for the operations and all that. However, there's on the right, top right, there's a guarantee, a contract obligation from the city. It basically says if there's a shortfall on the financing of that project, and it's not even like you have to pay us or it costs that, there's a loan for the shortfall. And when we do get enough revenues and customers on the system, then you get that paid back. And as a worst case, at the end of the term of the financing, you get that paid back. We never had to do that, but that protection is there if it was ever needed. But we use that guarantee. It helps us with financing it, gets us better interest rates. You know, we don't have any authority to tax or anything like that, you know, so we do lean on the cities and the partnerships we have, and then it's kind of a partnership for the financing of that. But it's a lot lighter load than if the city were bonding and paying for this.
Is there a time frame where that risk, that liability goes down, where kind of some of that initial investment is sort of recouped, like a certain number of years?
So the typical vanilla proposal, and it's not on this page, we typically do a 25-year payment guarantee after 2 years of capitalized interest. So it ends up being a 27-year term. We've had some cities do these projects, not through us, but where they say, hey, there's a, you know, maybe we're worried about the take rate and we want a little more time, but a lower take rate, you know, like ongoing obligation, but for a lot more years. You know, we can change that. There's a couple of adjustments. I don't think it's needed, but if that was the pain point, like we thought we couldn't get to the right take rates and revenues, we could extend the term longer and lower that. But then we're on the hook longer, and that's another risk point, right? I'd like to get this thing paid off sooner than later. So we basically, it's off to the races for us. We take care of everything on the left. We finance it, we build it, we take care of it, you know, do everything. The city provides that revenue guarantee and through a services agreement based on some take rate. 40% to 45% is typical. Actually going to need to be a little higher in Alpine. I'll talk about that. It is an expensive city to build. However, we got some protections in here, right? It's not the intention that this would ever cost the city anything. So some of that as well. We've done a whole bunch of these others, and those have been successful. Any revenue from the city. So the city comes in and says, hey, we want to connect our facilities and we're going to buy some internet. We're going to do whatever. We're going to charge you for those services, a really good rate, but 100% of that money is going to help offset that guarantee. There's a lot of demand. All the trends are favorable. We just keep seeing more and more people migrating to fiber. And then there's that kind of loan guarantee. If there was a shortfall, it gets paid back. Any new development and expansion of the city counts towards the revenue obligation, but doesn't increase your commitment to the financing. So what happens is we have a first phase, which gets us to kind of a break-even scenario. And then you go build a whole bunch more houses. We will pay for that with no guarantee from the city. But any customers and revenues that come from any of that growth counts and offsets your obligation. So if we come out of the gate with 50% take rate requirement, like we need to go get 50%, say you go put in another 1,000 homes. I mean, some people are like, we don't want those homes, but some growth's happening, right? Those will help. So what in all these projects, especially in a city that would have some growth, we see that decrease, that risk is decreasing over time as a result of any growth. So that helps. Those are all things, it's like, you know, it's nice to know that you're taking on a risk and that risk effectively goes down over time. Now, this slide, again, we don't expect this to cost the city a dollar. But if it did, it would be worth it. So I just want to make that case. When you do this, you know, we have so many examples of before and after. When we build a fiber network and we introduce competition and options, you experience significant benefit. And those benefits are, well, people save money, and that's whether or not you actually sign up for the service. Bringing in competition, your other options you have now get cheaper. You know, there will be a response by the incumbents. And so you just immediately put $27 a month into the wallets of every household in your city. I mean, effectively, right? There's a huge cost savings. There's really not anything else you can do that would bring that big of an economic benefit. It's just statistical. This has happened. There's a link here to the study that shows this. You increase property values. Maybe we don't want that right now. It's already gone up so much across Utah, but you know, it's a benefit. People look for homes that have fiber.
What year was that average?
It's a few. This is about 3 years old, if I remember right.
Okay.
So it's pre-COVID. Obviously, it's almost. I think if they redid this, it'd probably go up more. I mean, we didn't used to have people who demanded fiber where they lived like we see now. It's become critical. Protection and net neutrality. So, you know, speeds and these things are important, but also consumer privacy, open internet without blocking and differentiation and discrimination, those types of things. So, you know, we build these networks and require that of our providers that this is an open service. We eliminate digital divide issues. So where you have cherry picking, you know, some parts of the city have good service and some parts don't. I mean, this is we're going in, we're going to do the good and the bad, right? This is not a cherry picking type approach. That's caused the problem we have in most of our cities. And there's a significant quality of life. It's just a great benefit to have good broadband in your home and business. And then we make these points, no other municipal project, I mean, a rec center, a park or whatever, you know, like you can't come up with something that creates such a significant benefit to everyone in the community as this. And yet this all comes at no cost. There's risk. Now I get that, but I would say that even if the city did have to pay the entire cost of this project and finance it and pay for it, it would be worth it more than any other project you could come up with. The beauty of it is that we have a model that pays for it from voluntary subscriptions. And people just sign up if they want. Okay, so moving on from there.
Are you in Pleasant View?
Pleasant Grove or Pleasant View?
Pleasant View.
Not Pleasant View.
Okay.
We are building out Pleasant Grove right now. So that's the closest one we're doing right now. Okay, so, let's see. I accidentally put this slide somewhere. Oh, no, it's this in here. Okay, this one we cut to the chase here. So we designed it. So this isn't like us making up numbers. We had our team actually do a full design. We may have missed a little bit here and there from new development, but this is designed down to the foot. We know every conduit, every box, every splice, every switch that we would need to build this network and how it would interconnect with our backbone. If we went and did this right now, it costs us $10.9 million. It's not cheap. When we go and finance that, the equivalent debt service on that comes out to about $52,000 a month, a little bit more, 52,000. So I should be looking at this properly. I keep looking at the screen over there. So $52,320 is what that comes out to, and that's conservative. We put some headroom in there. So what we're going to do is we need to go get that money. We need to go get enough customers so that we're covering 52,530. Well, that fee we charge is $30 a month, and that's the portion that goes to paying off the debt of this. And that's equivalent of 1,744 subscriptions. So that's based on the current model we have here, we need that many customers. And then there's no cost. That's a little higher than what we've seen. That's a 56.3% take rate if we assume just residential customers. If we have some schools, which we're bidding on right now in the city, but you know, some businesses and some other things, it's probably more like a 53% take rate before we break even on this. This is a little high. I wish it were 30. We have cities that are above 53, several cities. I think Morgan's our highest, about 60%. Woodland Hills is about 55%. We don't need that day one. So
You may be covering this in another slide, but what's the physical disruption for a street to be provided? So let's say you're gonna head up Main Street tomorrow morning. What are we gonna see on the surface?
So you'll see our drills, they'll show up and they'll dig a hole where we're gonna put a box, but they're all subsurface. So they're not the green boxes that Comcast puts in or the pedestals like CenturyLink. Everything we put in when we're done is subsurface, but they'll dig a hole. And then they'll dig a hole, 100 feet down, or if it's where there's homes next to each other, they'll be every 2 homes basically, because we'll use the corner and then do drops to each house. And then that drill will drill underground, so there's no surface disruption. It will have been painted. I mean, some people get argued when they go paint the utility lines, but that fades over time. And so then when they're done, you'll have a little green box that looks like a sprinkler box. But inside of that will be conduits and fiber cables, and in some of them a splice connection where we splice fibers together. So when it's done, it's super clean. We give you a tour of some of these other cities that we've done, and you'll drive down and be like, I can't even tell there's a network here other than every other property has a new sprinkler box in the corner, right? And that's what it looks like. And every once in a while we got to cross the street.
Okay, yeah, so you go under streets primarily, right?
You go under the streets, and the stuff along the street is off to the side, so it's behind curb. Some of the stuff you'll see from some cities like Google, that Google Fiber are doing, they tear up the roads horribly. They actually saw cut down both sides of every single street, and they saw cut across the streets. It just tears it up. I don't know why any city allows it, to be honest, but yeah, roads people hate those projects. We don't do it that way. We are cities. We're going to do this the way that's best for cities. We don't want big ugly boxes. We don't want our streets torn up. So we do horizontal directional drilling. It's the best product. And so when we're done, it's nice and clean, and it's very similar for the home. We don't use the big horizontal directional drills. We use people don't like the term missile, but it's called a missile bore, where it's a little metal piston about this big, hooks up to a compressor, and it kind of vibrates its way underground. So we dig a hole out by the box, and we dig a hole next to your house, and then that thing tunnels underneath your sprinkler lines, so we go deeper, so we don't hit your sprinkler lines. Sometimes we hit them and we'll fix them, but generally we can avoid them. But even your landscaping, we don't, other than the hole next to your house and the hole right by the sprinkler box looking thing, we can go under driveways, we can go under sidewalks. We don't kill your flowers unless we step on them, and we'll replant it if it's a flower if we step on it. But we take a lot of pride in the quality of the construction. And that's something that's like, if you have any question on like, are we really good or not, where we'd say, hey, let me get you a couple city managers from other cities where we're working. And they say it's the very best construction project they've had in their city. So it is construction. I mean, you'll have people like, what's this thing doing in my front yard? And it's like, it'll be there for a day or two. They get a door tag on their house. Every house gets one of those soon before we show up, saying this is what's going on, and this is the person to call if there's any lingering damage. And for a couple of days, you're going to have some stuff coming in and out of here. And then they move on to the next section, and everything looks like we were never there. So it's pretty good. It's intrusive for a little bit, but after a few days, we're gone, and it's all there in the ground. All right, so this is a financing model. They basically peg the financing to that debt service. So that's what this represents. There's a 2-year period of capitalized interest. There's no guarantee obligation from the city. And then what happens is we build it, and we start seeing customers come on about 8 to 10 months in. That's when we finish the construction. Contractually, we give ourselves probably up to 2 years, but city the size of Alpine, I mean, we're doing about 2,000 homes of construction a month right now, and we probably put about a quarter of that into Alpine. So we'll probably crank it out in about 4 months of construction after about 4 months of engineering. So 8 to 10 months is actually pretty reasonable. But we have time. You have customers coming onto the system,
And all of that revenue from those customers accumulates and acts as a buffer. So we fully anticipate not having enough customers after 2 years, and that's okay because we've built ourselves that buffer. And so the green line on this represents a break-even scenario that we model out, which basically says, you know, we have about 52 months before we actually need to hit that number of residential subscribers. The blue line trends closer to what we actually see in our other projects and what we'd expect here. So we wouldn't quite avoid that that revenue target at 24 months. However, that area under the line before that 2 years period is significantly greater. So we effectively buy ourselves that third and fourth year. And we look at this and say, well, you know, we think you'd actually be like Morgan as far as competitive options, demographics, and things like that. We think you'd be like Woodland Hills. It is a little bit more of an upscale community. I don't want to say anything, you would get me in trouble, but we do better in those types of communities than we do in lower income areas. We care about those areas, of course, and they do cost less. And sometimes their risk threshold from a take rate perspective is lower, but we also come into communities like Alpine and we do get much higher take rates. So a higher take rate requirement in Alpine doesn't scare me like it would in another city where I wouldn't expect to get that take rate. So anyways, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it was achievable. Again, we don't really make any money off of this, and I'm not a business selling you anything. This is a partnership, and we look at these and say, this could work, and this looks pretty good. It's not like automatic, like, oh yeah, we've got, we're going to double the revenue in 2 months or something. But it looks pretty good. And there's a couple ways we can mitigate things and change things to help. But these are just comparisons. So Layton City, we kind of pegged them and said, hey, you got to hit this revenue target. We blew way past that. Stopped charting that one. But we're a lot higher than we need to be. That was a $23 million project. Payson, we're probably, we're 30% higher than we need to be there. Morgan, we've doubled the revenue we need. That one, that was a 60%, but they were pegged at about 40%, needing about 40% take rate, right? So when we say, hey, in Alpine, your blue line, which would represent the debt service, imagine that being 50% higher. So it's like, I think we'd be there, but it is a little bit higher target. Again, we'd have to come into the market and expect a higher take rate than what we see in, say, like Midvale or West Valley City. But if we did like we do in Linden, we're great. We do like we're doing in Woodland Hills or Morgan, we're great. We cover it. The whole thing pays.
So why is the take rate higher? Is it just a cost to install is more expensive?
It's demographics. The cost to install. Oh yeah. The reason the line is higher, the obligation is higher, is it is expensive. The distance between homes is greater. Your density plays into that. There's also more rock in the ground, right? So we've had to assume a higher, we call it a rock adder in construction, of having to anticipate a certain amount of rock. And there's some parts of the city where like it's not so bad on the lower, flatter parts, but we build a lot. Everything we build is this kind of type of territory. Like you look at the cities.
Well, and I know we're just like on the cusp of this new infrastructure money coming from the federal government. What if you don't hit your take rate in the projected time? Is there a way to close that gap with this infrastructure money that's going to be given to each state that will then filter to each city?
Yeah, I really wish it was going to be available. The problem is that they basically said that that's going to be based on the federal definitions of unserved areas according to the FCC definitions of broadband. And, we can all thank them, but Alpine is 100% ineligible for that. And I wish it were eligible. We'd be like the first person to do that. We anticipate we'd be able to go to some very rural parts of Utah and use that money. But anywhere a provider claims, and they don't even have to actually deliver on it, but anywhere a provider claims to provide 100 meg service is ineligible because
we do have some areas in Alpine that aren't serviced, and so that's why I wondered if you could.
They are claimed.
100% of Alpine is marked as served. I mean, I disagree with that.
Are they counting satellite internet? Or there
The
are-
wireless providers. The wireless providers
Yeah.
have said that they'll service anywhere in the city, and obviously won't. I mean, be like, there's a tree, you know, or if there's a whole, you know, like it doesn't work. But they submit reports to the federal government every year, and they basically say this area is my territory,
Mhm.
and they round up and lie to some extent in order to prevent money from the federal government from being used for competitors, right? So they have an incentive to
Do you
exaggerate.
have a map or layout of Alpine on what providers cover what, or at least claim that, you know, beyond?
The
wireless?
FCC has the maps that basically, like, every time they have one of their grant programs, they create a new set of maps. And so that'll show who claimed on the RDOF, which was the most recent one they did. In this infrastructure bill, they are planning a new round of maps. So it's like, well, we'll have updated maps, but they're gonna go the wrong way. You'll have more claim of coverage than you have today. Unfortunately, again, if there's any opportunity to go like lobby them to up the definitions for broadband and fix that and make money available, we're obviously very interested in that. But the hope of being able to access that funding for Alpine, it's just not gonna happen.
I'm just looking at, I think mostly we're covered at 50 megabits. I don't know. You're saying that though that the maps will show that we're covered at 100?
Yep. The state
Yeah, I
doesn't
don't agree with
have-
those maps.
Well, I completely disagree with the maps too.
Well, and I think actual usage is like sub 30 on average in the city, right? You've probably seen that.
Yeah, and part of the reason we're here is because we are getting inquiries like crazy on our website. Like people are like, it's terrible, we need better options.
Yeah.
And on a per capita basis, it's higher interest here than we have in other cities. And that's a obvious indicator that the services here are bad. And it's not even like moderately bad. What happens is your cable provider has oversubscribed their network severely.
Mhm.
And so it may work okay at 3 a.m, but the problem is when you use it, it's terrible. And that's because they have a limited amount of capacity coming in. They just keep adding homes to the same tiny pipe. And it's just, anyways, it's bad.
Well,
So
and
this-
I'm not saying that your take rate wouldn't work. I was just seeing if there's a safety net in place with the new funding that's been approved. So it doesn't sound like.
Yeah,
Like
I wish
the
there
same-
were.
Okay.
They haven't set all the rules. They haven't done the refreshed maps. But even based on the previous program and the maps, it's like that one showed that providers were claiming coverage for all of Alpine.
Okay.
This time around, it's only going to have more providers claiming coverage
Yeah.
than the previous.
So I'm afraid we're running out of
Okay.
time because we do need to move on with our meeting. If there's any other pertinent questions or points that need to be made, I would advocate that we continue this conversation. I think this is a really good solution, potential solution, and that it needs to be addressed in future meetings as well.
Maybe just
Carla,
quickly, if, oh, I don't want to jump ahead of the council, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So if it's, for cities that have approached this, it's a public entity working with a public entity. So
Mhm.
what's the process? I mean,
It's an interlocal agreement, right? So we are an interlocal entity, and to partner, basically, say, here's an interlocal agreement that's public entity agreeing to do things with another public entity. The nice thing is that, we've done this many times over, sat down with cities and said, what do you want us to do and what do you want you to do? And, cities don't like to bond for these projects. They don't like to issue debt. And so UIA has kind of taken some of those hard points. And so UIA, the Utah Infrastructure Agency, as an interlocal entity, it issues the debt, it does the public hearings. It's the entity ultimately that's doing this, but the city provides that kind of backstop for just this one phase. And UIA comes in, it's already made millions of dollars of investment that you're piggybacking off of. It will guarantee the cost of the project. If there's overruns and problems, it will pay for that. And all future growth, all upkeep and maintenance and replacement is UIA does that, no city guarantee. And so it's really, a mutual risk partnership between the city and a collection of cities.
Shane, can I jump in? Cedar Hills has just gone through this process and it's on their agenda. They did an RFP and there's a recommendation, and on their agenda next week, they're going to make a decision of what they're going to do.
I don't know where they're going with their decision.
I do, but I'm not going to tell you.
I have a pretty good guess. I think it's Strata. But
So one of
There's
the,
some
one of the services
downsides
you
there.
provide is a survey for residents, is that correct?
yeah, so that is something that we're happy to do, is to conduct a survey. We'll host it and run it and then give you all the keys, right? So you can see all the results as they're coming in. If you want to tweak the questions or whatever, we just do that as a service, so you don't have to pay anything. If you want flyers to go out, then we want you to do that. But as far as, here's the questions, here's the platform where it hosts, you can push it out however you want with email and social media, whatever. But we think that's a good step, right? Collect citizen input. It also gets us really good visibility into what services are available, better than what's being reported. Again, those reports from the federal government are terrible, but a survey asking the residents, who do you actually use for service? What are you paying? What speeds do you have? Are you happy? You want the city to do this? Some of it is just gauging demand and take rate, but some of it's political, right? Some of it is, do you think the city should be involved in this, right? Is this the right role of government? We don't think it's the right role of federal government, but we love doing these things at the local level because there's accountability and we balance our books, and we have a lot of success with this. So politically, it actually helps. We're in some of the very most conservative cities in Utah. And people are like, how are you guys doing this in those cities? It's like, well, this is a kind of a conservative play here, right? We're building infrastructure to enable the private companies to come in and compete, and getting that feedback from our residents of, in this model, do you like it? Would you rather the city just come in and be the internet provider? And they're like, no.
Right, but to the
We
point,
want private companies to come in
right.
and compete.
So like you were saying, we're probably out of time with it, but
Okay.
what would be the next step?
I think it may be good to get into maybe a committee meeting, have a couple of council members, Mayor Merrill and Shane get together, and possibly Austin, and have some kind of, maybe some vetting steps that go toward whether this really is something the city would like to pursue. Does that make sense? And I'll leave it to Carla to oversee that. To work with the city and do that. Carla, does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, I'm just gonna assume that we would go through any major process. We'd have to do a scope of work and do an RFP and all of that. But yeah, no, I guess we'll just continue to work on this now that we've had the presentation from Utopia.
Yeah, so our recommendation would be a survey, and then we'd recommend an RFP. You actually don't have to in an interlocal, because you're not buying something, you're partnering, but we still recommend it because it vets out the other guys. There are other companies and people who are selling stuff rather than a partnership. And we actually would encourage you to do the RFP anyways, just to flesh out options.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We usually win those.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, that's kind of an exciting topic, because I think a lot of people are waiting for the opportunity to have a better service, or any service at all.
Yeah.
Okay, financial reports, Shane?
The financial report was included in the packet. I've updated the sales tax graphs. Sales tax this month, or this last month, was pretty amazing, actually. 37% higher than the month before.
Year before, right?
The month before.
Oh, it's
The month before, actually. Year to date,
Yeah.
compared to the previous year, we're up a little over 15.67%, I guess. So there's a month over month. Sorry, it is last month. Sorry, Greg, you are correct. Year over year for the month, and year over year cumulative for the year. So yeah, it's the month before that wasn't awesome. but there was a lot of catch up in the next month, so. And we're, you know, the trajectory is well above where we were last year, so. Anyway, things look good.
Unfortunately, some of that, the sales tax related is related to the cost of inflation. So it's really not great news for the population in general.
Yeah.
It's more revenues for us, but it's not great news for families. Okay, any questions on the budget, or not budget, but financials? Moving on to city project update. Shane?
I put this on there. I just wanted to touch on a couple things on what we're doing with water. And I think let's actually, take the next item and do it first, and then I'll talk about project.
Okay.
So, I'll go quick on this. I gave this little presentation to the Alpine Irrigation Company at their annual meeting last week. So, you know, we track usage for the year, overall pressurized irrigation usage. I'm gonna turn to my notes here. So, we used 4,753 acre feet this year as opposed to 6,107 acre feet last year. There was a 4 to 5 week period where we went from 3 days a week to 2 day a week watering. So, I mean, this is telling me that a lot of people helped out with the situation and complied and went to the 2 days a week.
Yeah.
I've actually had a lot of reports of people saying, we had no idea that we could actually get by on 2 days a week. We thought it would just do us in as far as our landscaping goes. And a lot of people found that it did not. But that's a 22% decrease from the previous year, which is pretty amazing.
It's interesting that 19 was even lower than that.
Yeah, yep. So we were 6.78% higher than 2019. You know, we do have growth in there, probably maybe 120 or so new homes, 100 to 120. So that's, I think, still really good with the growth that we've seen. So,
But I mean, I think if you factor in precipitation, right? That's a big factor.
Yeah.
that was too, that was definitely a factor. This year is definitely dry. So anyway, we were pretty happy with that. So projects, you know, a lot of people wonder, you know, what are we doing for the future to kind of shore up our system? Some of the things, the CUP project that we've invested a fairly significant amount of money in for the last year and a half was complete this year. It was tested the end of September and into the 1st of October. It couldn't be, so there's the pump station down by the West Rock or Kilgore gravel pit. The new pipe, we paid for about 50% of that. The pipeline from there to the city boundary, which Central Utah Water Conservancy District paid for. And then that's the end of that project. We had to install a filter building to filter this water before it goes into our system. So we couldn't test that CUP project until the filters were operational. We had issues with getting materials on some things that's prolonged that project. So it's not, the filter project is not complete, but we did get the filters to the point they could operate for testing. So we're now on a track to complete the filter project. Of all things, it's a fairly small addition to the building. We had a heck of a time getting block to try to match the building, and a few other components as well. So I would say the project's probably 85 to 90% complete, and probably within 30 days it should be 100%.
And Shane, how much water in it, by what percentage will that increase our water supply next year?
So Austin, can you put those graphs back up and go to the second page? So we have 770 feet, 770 acre feet of CUP water. So if we go to this, okay, so scroll up so you can see the 10 years worth of data for the Healy well, if it will let you. You might have to shrink it just a little bit. So I think in 10 years, if you look, this is in acre feet of use for the Healy well. We've got 3 years in 10 that we were over 770 acre feet. And so it's like, in a way, it's like adding, gotta look at this 2 ways. It's like adding another Healy well, but we can't use both of those right now at the same time. But when the Healy well goes down, we have CP that takes its place. So that's one way to look at it. We're actually looking at a modification within the building where the Healy well is. There's a well in there, and then there's some pumps. The well pumps to the kind of downtown area. The booster pumps take water from that area, which is also where the CUP water will go in the downtown area, and it can move water up to the next zone. So like Healy Heights, Smooth Canyon, all that kind of middle band of the city. So we're looking at modifying those pumps so that we would be able to pump the Healy well and use the CUP water at the same time. And then we would have an increase in source capacity.
Okay,
So
and you said the CP is 720 acre feet?
770.
70.
Yeah.
But you're saying it doesn't add to our water capacity if Healy well is pumping out 770. Is that what you're saying?
So
Not at the moment.
if Healy well, it's like CP water and Healy well would be
It's either or at this point.
identical source, like use one or the other. But by modifying some pumps, we should be able to pump the Healy well and bring CUP water in at the same time, which would give us an increase in capacity to our system.
So the CUP water only benefits a certain part of our city. Other cities are still reliant on the pump that pumps water for their area. Is that correct?
Right now, it would be able to benefit kind of
All
the
of Main Street?
downtown. It's like the biggest part of the city is the lower zone. So kind of from Westfield Road to the Healy well to halfway up Ridge Drive, Creekside Park would be in the low zone. So kind of that area there. You get up where you live, you'd be in the middle zone. So anyway, it will be when we finish and we're working on things, and we plan to have that change out in the pumps addressed by spring, so that we'll have more source capacity.
So I have to say, in spite of a derogatory letter that circulated throughout town a couple of weeks ago, we actually have added water capacity that'll be benefiting us next summer, right?
And I wanted to get this out there. I hope people are watching on YouTube so they
Yeah.
can hear this.
And we have increased our capacity.
So another thing that we've done, so Grove Spring takes care of almost 100%. This is the first year we've had to pump a well, and we only did it for a short time to supplement our culinary system because the spring flows were down. So we've got the 300 East well over here that's hooked to the culinary system, and then we have the Silverleaf well. The Silverleaf well and the 300 East have essentially sat there and not being used. They're kind of backup sources. You know, if we were to have contamination in our spring or something like that, we'd kick those on and you know, be able to take care of the needs of the city. We've left the 300 East well in that capacity. The Silverleaf well, we made some modifications this summer, and it took a while to get some materials, and so we only ended up pumping it for a short amount of time. But we now have that set up where we can change some piping in a fairly quick manner and pump into our irrigation system. So that would give us another 700 gallons a minute or so that can pump into our middle zone. And that's one benefit of that well being where it's at. Someday when we're built out, that may need to be dedicated to the culinary system. I see that being quite a ways out, actually. So that is an increase in source capacity into the system. let's see. We're also working on our master plan update, the culinary, we have that draft, we're reviewing it right now. The pressure irrigation, it's still being worked on, and probably sometime the first of the year, we'll be bringing that for review to the city council. The other thing that was done, and this is done in conjunction with the rigid Alpine subdivision, they're in the high zone, and especially in drought years, we struggle to get water up there. So we have 3 pumps that pump water from Ford Creek. They all 3 pumped into the low zone downtown. We took one of those pumps out, added a different pump, a different type of pump that can pump up to the high zone. So we have a way to supplement that zone when we have issues with drought years. So that was another way we didn't increase capacity in the system as a whole, but we made it so we could move water in ways that we couldn't before. And then we're still working on the rate study. So
Why is the rate study taking so long?
probably because we have so many other things going on. Not probably, it is
But
because
didn't we outsource that study?
we did, but it's not like they can just take it and get into our minds and pull all the information out that they need and go do it. They've created a model, but it takes quite a bit of our time to be able to finalize it.
Okay,
And we haven't been able, focus has been shifted on some other things, and we got to bring it back around now and get it paged up. So,
okay.
Shane, I've got a
yes,
question. So are we going to be able to be ready for next summer season to be able to actually use our meters and have the rates set for next
that's the
spring?
plan. Yes, that's the
Okay.
plan.
So what, if we look, kind of count backwards from middle of April when we turn our sprinkler systems on, how long before that are we going to be able to have that assessment done and be able to reach a conclusion?
Realistically, I would say it'll be sometime in March. By the time we got to work with the irrigation company because of our agreement with them, and kind of, I say get that buy off, or make sure they're on board so we don't violate our agreement with them.
Sure.
And going through that process, and then the city council process, and I'm sure we won't be able to do that in one meeting. It will be a few, and then probably at least one public hearing.
Yeah. That's kind of where I was gonna go with it, is people are gonna want to have a pretty good heads up before they start turning their water on. So we should target early March to have that finalized, have a public hearing in February, and finalized rates in March, so that everybody has adequate time to adjust.
Yeah, that's what we're shooting for right now.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's the kind of the PI side of things. Another question was on the cemetery. Our consultant got some information back to us yesterday with kind of a very rough grading plan for the north end of the cemetery. We're actually having a meeting tomorrow to try to refine that. I mean, just to tell you kind of what it involves to get things to a grade that we can access graves and to dig them in the winter. We'll have some retaining walls up there potentially that are 8 to 10 feet tall to make it work. So we could go in there right now and we could do a phase right behind the sidewalk pretty easily and have graves, we plant grass, get the irrigation system in and everything, and have graves there in a year. But what I don't want to do is go in and tie our hands on the other future phases by doing something in the first phase that's detrimental to future phases. And it's taken a little longer to get that master plan laid out, but it is a grading challenge up there, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Have we had to turn any residents away who needed a burial plot?
Not that,
Okay.
not that have had a family member die.
Okay,
Yeah. And then, I mentioned a few council meetings ago that I'd like to have a retreat. One of the items that I'd like to discuss are some other potential options for cemeteries, that are kind of detached from the current cemetery. And kind of dive into that a little bit. We have some ideas that, could probably move the timeline up on making more plots available faster and cheaper. This
Yeah.
this section on the north is going to be fairly expensive to build.
yeah,
So
okay.
anyway, those are just a couple projects that I wanted to touch on for the council tonight.
That's great. Thank you, Shane.
Mhm.
You've already taken care of item E in the
Yep.
in the consent calendar, so we can move on to our action items. Appreciate you doing the work on that report, Shane.
Mhm.
Let's move to the general plan. Kind of the final review.
All right, so we're gonna look at the general plan. I just want to highlight a couple of key things, maybe 3 points from the last discussion, and then if you want to discuss further things, we can do that, but let me just move into the highlights here. So really quick, moving into our land use section. I have here highlighted a new language that was added in. So in the previous meeting, we discussed the possibility of having something that talks about adding an Alpine community center, a community meeting room, a gathering place, if you will, for our community. And so per recommendation of Steve Doxey, one of our city attorneys, he recommended that be in the land use section. So we've added that here, where it kind of already fits in and goes with the rest of what's going on in 1.2. So that language has been added. Moving on, the other point that I wanted to get to is we've added a whole new section to the general plan, and that's our community engagement section. So this was recommended by Jessica Smewen in the last meeting. And I've worked with her in between now and then to kind of finalize the language that's in here. So if I can just get to it, it's at the very end of the document. Okay, so this would be the community engagement section. So it has one goal and it has 3 policies. The goal, as it reads, would be work in partnership with residents, businesses, staff, and council to support Alpine days, civic events, and other programs to increase social and community connections. And then it goes on to have 3 policies to make that goal, to bring that goal to pass. And so 1.1 is encourage citizen committees to create community engagement. 1.2, plan, support, and execute public gatherings to strengthen citizen social connections. And 1.3, promote interactive and transparent communication through online and printed mediums. So that's that section. And then the last thing I wanted to get to from our last meeting is we did discuss a bit about adding the the Bowery into the general plan. But as Shane mentioned earlier in our meeting, when we were talking about the conservation easement, we did a little bit of research on this, and it doesn't look like the city council ever adopted this. So what you're seeing here on this screen is there were 2 concepts. There's concept A, which is this one, and then the next screen, concept B. And so at one point there was a discussion from the city council where they said, hey, we want concept A and concept B kind of mesh together, take the best of each and create a new final plan. And so what the planning commission came up with was this here. This is the final concept. And so but as it stands, it was only a concept. It wasn't like a final thing, but I just want to kind of highlight this so you can kind of see what it entailed also because it relates to what we're doing with the conservation easement. So you can see, this is kind of the southwest corner here. There would be camping trailer spots. There would be, this loop would be added in. Over here where there's an amphitheater on the right-hand side. Actually, maybe it's better if I use the annotator for this. So here's the amphitheater. There's parking here. These are the camping trailer spots. And then if we move over to the east, I'll show you what's on that side of it.
Kind of feels like the impact of camp trailers would be fairly heavy.
That's why when I saw this, I'm like, I don't know.
And then
Yeah, it doesn't feel like,
these are camping spots.
Well, what's
So,
interesting, I do remember there was a discussion about the camp spots, but neither
Yeah.
concept A or B had camp spots, right?
right, right.
So somewhere that got put
Got
in with
more.
meshing A and B together.
that camp trailers were then included. Yeah, I don't remember that ever being part of the discussion before.
I think it was part of the discussion, but there's quite a few here and I'm not sure if that's.
It just feels like, the traditional use has been father-son outings, things like that, where it's fairly primitive and very temporary, in and out kind of stuff without a lot of impact. Obviously we've gone, that varies. I've seen father-son events up there that have been pretty impactful, but it seems like inviting RVs up there is a totally different level of activity.
And why did this get stuck? Do you recall after planning commission?
I don't know.
I think we just kind of lost sight of it, didn't we? It didn't, just kind of fell off the radar.
It must have.
Doesn't feel like
What
there
year
was a
was
reason
that,
for it.
Austin?
It was 2018, maybe. Yeah, I think it's been 3 years
It's
now.
been a while.
So it must have gotten put, I'm not positive, but it must have gotten put
That's
on
what
the
I
back
would
burner.
guess. I would have thought it was 5 or, yeah.
I don't ever remember seeing the camping spots. I remember the amphitheater, the fire ring, and the volleyball court, and just reworking all of that, and improving the pavilion. But I honestly don't remember in planning commission, 5 and 6 years ago, or city council, any of these camp spots or the spots for the trailers.
Yeah.
It was
I don't
discussed
think-
for sure, but I can't say where or when. I'm sure it
Yeah.
was before I was city administrator.
Oh, yeah.
Like Carla, I don't remember
I've never-
camp trailers ever being on there.
Yeah, I've never seen this version before.
Yeah.
So I think next year, we maybe take another look at this and refine it a little bit and get
Yeah.
something adopted that we can work towards.
And it definitely needs to be considered in the conservation easement, and those two need to be symbiotic.
Yeah.
But I don't know, just as a last word from my opinion, it just feels a little too improved to be congruent with the scope of what we've been looking at. I don't know, maybe you guys feel differently.
It's essentially what I said to Austin when we reviewed this together.
The trailers in particular. That's,
Yeah. I think
maybe
camping's
another
awesome.
level.
I think we've probably seen less camping as far as organized groups up there in the last few years, but I think that was a kind of a cool thing that we had a place to go do that.
Typically, because you couldn't have a fire.
Yeah, that's true. The drought has kind of managed that. But I think it's been great to have a place where residents could go up there and have an overnighter and go home when it gets uncomfortable.
Yeah. So we'll have to consider that with respect to the easement discussion too.
Yeah. Sorry, I got kind of sidetracked there, Austin. But I
No,
think
we're
that's worth
good.
looking
So, yeah, we don't feel like, obviously, this doesn't feel like it's ready to go in the general plan yet. So we left that out of the general plan. But those other two things that we just went over, the new section, community engagement, and that little snippet that's been added to the land use section, we feel like those
Yeah.
fit well unless you feel otherwise. But,
I had a couple of questions. So just a quick thing on page 21, I think that should be 0.3.1 versus 2.1, the policy.
which
21
21?
in the plan. Just a quick.
Yeah, you're right,
So-
yeah.
And then under community engagement, principally it's all great, but it says work in partnership with residents, businesses, staff and council. And I kind of thought staff and council is somewhat implied throughout in there. It's kind of the city's package. But I think one thing we might be missing is other organizations, like that are not necessarily businesses, potentially.
Volunteer groups.
Like the chamber, like
Yeah.
the AF chamber. I mean, I was thinking
Yeah.
of that, of like our Main Street trick or treat, of how to encompass an activity like that. So if it's implied that staff and council's an implied entity, but we need to add outside, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Let me see, one other thing in here was, so the term citizen is used, a lot frequently, which is fine, but I think, we aren't actually, we're citizens of a country, not really of a city. In the plan, we use, I think it looks like residents 6 times and citizens 3 times. A couple here, and I don't, I think resident might be more correct. Versus citizen, I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually true. Resident rather than citizen. I mean, citizen is kind of a general term, but really we're residents.
And then in 1.2, I thought versus execute, maybe conduct, they're pretty much the same, but. Or you could have both or either, but
So,
I
was
don't
that
like to see
replace it
executing the
with
public in a
conduct?
plan. What's that?
conduct instead of execute?
Yeah. As an idea, but.
Yeah.
Where's that at?
Sounds nice. It
Which
sounds
page
a
is
lot
that on?
more friendly.
28.
I liked execute because it was more of a commitment. It
That's
was
true.
like kind of holding you to it.
There's that.
I have a question, Mayor.
Yes.
So first one on the land use one that Austin modified. I just want to make sure I understand when it says encouraging develop and maintain venues that enhance a sense of community and provide residents an opportunity to congregate. I thought that was good, but now we're doing including an Alpine community meeting room. What is that specifically? Do we know what that is?
It's the change we discussed.
About the
for
fire department.
station.
So. And other public gathering spaces. So I'm just saying. I just question whether it should be in there. But I mean, it's a general purpose without saying specific things. I mean, before that, we kind of say what we want to do and how we do that is all up to the council. But
So do you mean maybe not being so specific, but like
one room, exactly.
listing, including public gathering spaces, just more general or?
Yeah, exactly. And it could be the Alpine community meeting room, but it could also not be, or it could be something else. But it feels like we're tying ourselves into something right here that I don't know why we are.
I like just including public gathering spaces. I don't think that was a staff
That was
recommendation.
a
I thought it-
recommendation by Steve in the minutes.
Well,
Steve.
But the recommendation include the change of the fire station. I thought came from one of the council members, and then Steve said, oh, instead of putting it in this section, we should put it in this.
Yeah, the Alpine, the community meeting center, originally it was a meeting, and instead of a room, it was a meeting center. And then we refined that to room, but originally that came from Jessica. And then Steve said, why don't you put it in the land use section if you're going to include it?
Well, I understood Steve to say that this general plan is a land use plan, and the community engagement thing there, but it really is a land use plan.
Yeah,
So that's why he said, put it in, a community center would be a land use or a building type structure type plan that would go in.
Again, that's just open for discussion with, I just don't know why, if we're better off saying a specific room, a specific location of a specific.
You think we should be or
Should
should not?
not.
Shouldn't,
Yeah, I would agree with
I would
that.
agree with Jason on
Yeah.
that. I just
Maybe
say that these meeting places or how is it again?
Which could include that.
Public gathering spaces.
I like that too.
Next question I have is page 13 on transportation and traffic circulation. Number 1.6. I think it's, Austin did a good job capturing what we said last time, limit all the way up to the last sentence. So it says, or other areas outside of city boundaries are compatible with the goals and policies of the general plan. And then it says any additional street connection to such areas would require city council approval, appropriate amendments to the general plan, master street plan, and applicable city ordinance. I don't think that last sentence is needed in there. That's just a normal process to go through to change things, but what we're trying to say is our goal in the policy is to limit those. That's where I think it should stop. That's not to say that what's here wouldn't happen, because that then moves to process that we have right now to change it, but putting it there creates confusion, in my opinion, that we're trying to say that we're going to limit these connections that aren't already in our master plan. And that's what it should end at. But then we say, but if we do it, here's the process we do it. I don't think belongs here.
So it's kind of like saying the city council and staff be involved. It doesn't really need to be stated.
Right.
Because that's the process.
So I would
I
take
think
that.
You're feeling like it leaves a way out? Is that-
Well, yeah, I mean, what it's doing is just stating, yeah, kind of. It's saying, here's our policy, and our policy is not to do this. But it confuses a little bit when you say, but if you want to,
Right.
you have to go through the city council and change these things.
Mhm.
I just don't think it doesn't change that that's still the process, but I don't think it needs to be in there.
Yeah.
And same with the next one down. I'd actually like in 1.7, promote open streets accessible to all citizens by prohibiting all private street and gated communities, period.
We went over that when you were gone. We do have places that
Allow it.
allow it.
So we have private
Specifically the one,
driveways, but what if,
specifically the one, Summit Point or
Well, that's actually a driveway. So this
driveways are
came-
different.
This came as a result of my final review, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
correct, yeah.
There are places in our ordinance where private streets are allowed. Senior housing, assisted living. And it's almost like if you don't have that last, except where allowed by ordinance, we're saying in one part of ordinance, we allow them, but we're saying here that we want to get rid of them all, they're prohibited. So it seemed like a conflict with what we have in our ordinance.
But, and that just seems to create an opportunity for somebody to dance on either side of the fence successfully. If we're saying it's not allowed in one area, but is allowed in.
Well,
another area.
I just wasn't sure how you can have in 2 places in your ordinance that you allow private streets,
And
but
one
then
place where
have
we
in your
don't.
general plan that you don't.
So if a new
That makes sense.
subdivision comes in, so this is the reason why I'm saying this.
Mhm.
This kind of gives kind of our goals and aspirations as a city, what we want our city to be.
Mhm.
And if a new subdivision comes in right now, let's take Lawn Lot subdivision, not Lawn Yield subdivision that he came in. He came in and wanted to do a private street there
Mhm.
with the cul-de-sac and it's gated and everything. We said at the time, and nothing has changed in our ordinance doesn't allow for a private street right there.
Mhm.
And so, to your point, that one didn't work, but the retirement community, I forget what it is, they're on Red Pine. obviously they do have them, but it's a different kind of a street. I mean, it's a street that people can't drive on. It's it's basically driveways. It almost is
Right.
like a private driveway there as opposed to a street, in my opinion. But what this is trying to do is saying for future developments that come in, do we want to say as a city that our vision in the general plan is for these to be allowed or them not to be allowed? And that's what I think that this is saying or should say. And if we're allowing it, then great. But if we're saying that they're not allowed based on new subdivisions coming in, I don't think our ordinance, I disagree with you. I mean, I know you're the main guy, but I disagree that the retirement community is not a street, in my opinion. It's a
Well, they're
private
called
driveway. I know,
streets.
but to me, it's the same thing as a private driveway.
Yeah,
I can't go race around that, and do whatever I want in there because
yeah.
it's a narrow driveway between garages, just like the private street, private drive that you're talking about. For subdivisions, we don't allow private streets currently in the ordinance.
Right. Yeah, and I guess, I mean, my mind's thinking in the ordinance, it says private streets, in that senior housing ordinance, they need to be 20 feet wide, and it goes into specifics. And so, I don't know, in my mind, it seemed like a conflict. So I brought it up and the council reviewed it 2 weeks ago. So,
Well, that's one we can take a vote on. I think that it should say how we feel about it one way or another within subdivisions or ordinances. I mean,
mhm.
just one last thing. I don't know if we answered the question on that one yet, but maybe what we do is we propose it and we say what we want to do as a council and vote on it individually. I mean, what do you see as the process right now?
So the
'Cause
process
that
right
might be
now.
one that me and Lon, for example, or me and Greg, or Carla disagree on. How would we come to a consensus on that one particular?
I think you vote on the
1.7.
version,
Yeah,
you vote on the version that you like. And if it doesn't pass, you vote on the next motion that may include those edits. Is that right?
yeah, I think if I understand correctly, up to this point, this may be the only issue that there's question on. And I would just suggest voting on any issues within the plan that there, is a question on. And then what we should be doing is getting a final plan. Then we'll have a public hearing on the 30th. And then the council can adopt this general plan if they're ready. And I hope you do, because
It's been a while.
that's the last meeting and I don't really want to start over with it, so.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna ask one last question. On the Lambert map, this is not probably for discussion, but on the Lambert master plan, the road that goes up to the water tower, it's currently listed as a hard surface trail as opposed to a service access only. Should that be changed in our master plan to a service access only red?
We've had the conversation before that doesn't need to be an improved road, right? Because we have vehicles that can make that trip without improvement. By improvement, I mean paved or.
Well, yeah, it's okay the way it is today. I mean, if use a little bit of improvement, but
Maybe some grading, yeah.
yeah. It's called a gravel road.
Okay.
That's the line designation.
It might be more rocky than gravel.
Yeah, occasionally that tank overflows and something malfunctions and it really washes things out. Was there anything else, Austin?
No, I mean, the only other thing is, we've just updated all the figures in here, so they're now higher quality, higher resolution.
So I think the one thing we should mention on there, and you tell me if this didn't happen, there was a discussion about adding some additional park property designated on the land use plan.
Oh, yeah, that did actually, I forgot to mention that, so let's
Where are you?
Let me find the map.
The after page 10, yeah, you got it.
Okay. So this packet, the one that you see here in the packet, this was just a mock-up, but we actually have a more final version of this. So that will be put into the next draft. But where you see those dots here, I'll just highlight it. So this area
Down at
here,
Keely.
and then we have it here in the legend. It's gonna look different on the final one. It's a different color scheme, but that's the idea, is we have a place in the legend, and then we're indicating that that's proposed public open space.
So just a little bit of discussion on this. I had a discussion with Craig about this to make sure that we're handling the process correctly. If that's shown on the plan, if it's proposed to be shown on the plan as future open space, we really should notify that property owner.
Okay, so that actually is a question I had. We have an agreement that was signed and renewed, right? About
That
5 years ago.
that expired.
It
in
did expire.
April of
That was
this
my
year.
question. Okay.
So as that property sits right now, if the owners want to subdivide the property, they'll have to reapply.
Yeah.
And the ordinances are a little bit different than when it was approved previously.
Without that open space, it's a half-acre requirement, correct?
Yeah, it's a half acre zone.
Yeah.
So as I understand the process, if it was put on the land use map as future open space and the owners came in and said, hey, we really don't have interest in doing a PRD. We want some larger lots. The city says, hey, on our general plan, it shows that as park property. The city would have to buy that property in order for it to be a city park. If they chose to go the PRD route, then it could come through another way. So
Otherwise, we just default to the zoning.
yeah, so my question on this, this general plan or this land use map was worked on and previously adopted. So my question to Craig is it appropriate to change it through the overall general plan, amending the overall general plan document? And yeah, you can, but we thought in all fairness, the property owner should know, because they're probably not aware at all that that's going on. If they miss the public hearing notice, that I think it'd just be, be upfront and say, hey, it's proposed that this be shown on the land use map as a park.
Is it not the same property owner that it's been historically?
It
Did it change
is.
hands?
There's two parcels there.
Mhm.
I guess we haven't really looked closely into ownership, but my understanding is now one parcel is owned by one member of the family and the other by
okay.
another member of the family.
Okay.
So they may choose to develop together someday. They may choose to develop independent of the other one.
Okay.
So.
And are we sure that that's CR 20,000, not CR 40,000?
Yes.
The zoning can be changed at any time, correct?
By council.
Well,
The zoning, there'd have to be a rezone application or a movement by council to do so.
yeah. Mhm. Yeah, it's currently zoned CR 20,000.
And Carla, you're probably already aware of this, but you can see the neighborhood that borders that space is smaller because of the PRD, but just north of that subdivision is all half-acre lots, which follow the zoning.
That's correct.
Same thing with over to the left where Stonehenge is. They have a PRD.
So So we need direction from the council on if we want to show that on there. If we do, we'll notify the property owners that there will be a public hearing on the 30th.
So was there no extension like we signed last time, 5 years ago? I think,
No.
or 7 years ago. Was there no extension requested by them? And but was it requested before, or was it requested by the city?
It was, I think they requested it before, along
Okay.
with the 2011 settlement agreement. That's when it was extended.
So them allowing it to expire would imply that they don't particularly want that anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I would take it, yes. And the ordinance was different for the PRD back, I think it was in 2004, maybe?
He's before that.
Might have been before
Right.
that.
2001 or
So-
2.
If there were any hazards that touched the property, it was required to be developed as a PRD. There's, I can't remember if it's debris flow, rock fall, or one of the hazards barely comes into the property. I mean, barely. And that's what forced it into a PRD. That ordinance was changed a few years later.
Okay.
And that requirement's not there now.
Gotcha.
The PRD was put at the discretion of the city council if they allow it or not. So. But we would want to, this is just drawn in, just hand drawn. We want
Well,
to, make a nice map and.
it seems like a good idea to show it in there as long as the owner is good with it. I mean, can we draw it in for now, notify the owner, and if they request us to remove it, we do between now and the next meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
And
they
to
could
your
come.
point, you don't have to remove it still. You just have to purchase it, right? Is that the?
That is correct.
Yeah, I mean, this same thing happened, so the, what is now Box Elder South, the 40 acres, it was shown on our general plan or our annexation plan, is the city would annex it if it came in as a park. So an annexation petition was submitted. City said, well, if it's gonna come in, it needs to be a park. They said, well, we don't want that. David Church said you'd have to buy the property. They came back with the price that the city couldn't pay for it.
Right.
So I would see the same
Yeah.
process here.
I would too.
Yeah.
So would it be more appropriate to label it potential public open space so that it doesn't?
No,
No, Carla?
no, my understanding was that if, because it's in the city, and if we have it designated as a future park, if they come in with a development that we have grounds to deny based on that they're not following our general plan. That's why I insisted that that be put in there.
Okay.
Is that not correct?
Not totally correct. You cannot, by general plan, inversely condemn a parcel of property. And the general plan is an admonition or laudatory or a goal for the future. And I see nothing wrong with indicating that it's a potential public park, as long as we understand that if we do not have an ordinance that requires them to dedicate a portion of that property to for public purposes, we're going to end up buying it or walking away from our laudatory concepts.
So Shane, do you know why our city ordinance changed back in the early 2000s or even further back?
Well, as I recall, if there was a hazard on the property owner was forced by our ordinance into being developed as a PRD.
They couldn't mitigate the hazard?
Right, it just said, if there's a hazard present, it has to be a PRD. And I think there might have been some projects that the council's like, we really don't want that open space, or we don't like what happened there. And so it went to, at the council's discretion, a PRD can be approved if, or allowed, if the property owner requests it and the city council is in favor of it.
Okay.
If the council requests it, or if the property owner requests it, which that's the key right there.
Yeah.
Right here, it's imposed.
That's correct.
Does anybody oppose leaving it in there and notifying the property owner? If they object, then we have to address it. Isn't that what you're after, Shane?
Yes.
No, that's, if we move in that direction, that seems to cover all of our bases.
Yeah, we'd like to have a complete document, so that when we have the public hearing, we can say, this is the document that's been refined and prepared, and then if it's there and property owners speak out and the council says, hey, we want to pull that back, then we can do that.
Yeah. So Carla and Jessica, we got two nods here. Lon's out of the room, but do you guys comfortable with that? Just including it unless the property owner objects?
Yes, I'm in favor of leaving it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, let's move on. What other elements do we need to be discussing right now?
I think that's it. isn't it?
That's it. That's all I had.
Unless the council has something else.
I think the only thing I'd be concerned about is the, how this tags onto the conservation easement and vice versa. That maybe, and I don't remember if there's language specific to a conservation easement here, but we may want to add a clause that allows the city, as it sees fit, to adopt conservation easements to preserve open space and leave it open, not to define. I just want to make sure that this doesn't conflict with a conservation easement once it's written up.
I can't think of where it would conflict. I mean,
I don't think it does.
no, I don't think it does either. Well, I mean,
Okay.
what you're proposing to add is kind of like a couple of these other things we've talked about. It's a process that can be done by the council. So I guess it's up to council if you want that statement in here. If it's not here, it doesn't mean you can't do it as well.
Yeah, and that's what I'm after is does it prohibit us from doing something if we don't include it? And if it doesn't, then there's no need to address it.
I don't
Okay,
think so.
all right. So we'll see the final version in our next meeting.
Okay.
I had a comment. Oh, sorry, I had to leave for a moment.
We talked about you while we were gone.
That's good. Hopefully it was
Positive.
good. Back to Jason's promote open streets accessible to all citizens thing.
We do need to finalize that. Thanks.
1.7, what if you just put promote open streets accessible to all citizens, period?
See, I'm good with that. See, because I feel like this is basically an aspirational document.
Yeah.
Promote
And it's
open streets.
forward-looking.
Yeah, promote open streets accessible to all citizens, period.
Yeah,
I think that's cool.
short and sweet.
Does that address your concern, Jason?
Promote open street accessible to all citizens. Sounds great.
Well, I don't think you even have to do open street, just promote streets accessible to all citizens, because it would imply that it would have to be open in order to be accessible.
Council, we have about 17 minutes before it requires a motion to extend. So do the next two topics appear to be pretty streamlined,
They'll
right?
be quick, I think.
Okay, let's do that then.
Okay, fire station remodel. So Chief and I and some of his, some of the firefighters and
Officers.
officers and various people. We met with two different architectural firms, got proposals from both of them. There's quite a spread in cost, but they both essentially were proposing to do a feasibility study to look at space, look at needs, make some recommendations, come up with a concept plan that we could use to kind of gauge how much it's gonna cost to build. And I mean, this proposal from Babcock was $3,500. I think it's very reasonable. And everybody involved felt good about the proposal and the people that we met. And they're very anxious. They've contacted me a couple times. They'd love to get going on this. So we're just asking for the council's approval to move forward with this proposal from Babcock Design.
We get a motion for that?
I'll make a motion that we approve the proposal from Babcock Design to complete a feasibility study for the remodel of the Alpine Fire Station for the amount of $3,500.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Motion by Lon Lot, seconded by Greg Gordon. Any discussion on that motion? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It sounds unanimous. Any opposed? Just to check. Motion passes. Good deal. Item C, approval of the additional trail sign kiosks.
Yeah, so when we started this project, and the first phase of it's still not quite complete, we need to decide which sign. We have 3 different signs that were, I think 2 of them are installed. Another one's sitting at the shop waiting to be installed. The signs themselves, the kiosks are in, but we need to decide which one's the best. There's a pretty good price spread between the 3 options. But we had talked about putting some additional trail sign kiosks in other locations to kind of tie everything together. So we're proposing 3 more. One would be at the North Point Trailhead, one at the Ridge Trailhead, and then one up in Three Falls at the lower parking lot. They would have the same type signage that we developed for Lambert Park. There would be an overall sign and then a more detailed sign for that area. Still prices continue to go up, so we thought it might be wise to just go ahead and get these other 3. We put money in the budget for it and got the price here in the packet. So we're just looking for a vote to.
Well, I'm just wondering on the North Point, that's not like a really heavily traveled staging area. Would it be better to put one maybe in the south area of town? We don't have anything southern yet at Creekside, or I was looking and seeing
Well,
if maybe there might be a better place.
I don't know. So
There's not a lot of connectivity in the trails down there, and that's we actually discussed that, I think, when we were looking originally. We talked about, maybe one at Creekside or something like that, and
that's
my
more
recollection-
informational than anything, right? People just stand and read it, but they still have to travel to the trailhead.
Yeah, so the
Okay.
purpose of this was trying to show, bikers, joggers, walkers, whatever that use the trails, how the connectivity goes, and it seemed to make sense to put them at the trailheads.
So we had a conversation a few meetings ago about the future parking lot at the top of Three Falls. Actually, it's more kind of the midline, right? Because you can go up
Yep.
from there. But I'd love to see one right there
Yeah.
as well.
And there would be one there when that is developed.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
which should be by spring, right?
So.
So do you want to just order an extra one for that one? So as
Yeah.
prices are going up, we can mitigate a little bit of cost.
We could, but they're awkward to store. They're.
You
an
stay
odd
at my
shape,
house.
and You wouldn't want it
Yeah.
there. The guys couldn't wait to get them out of there.
Is there a way we could prepay for it and show the commitment and then have them produce it at the appropriate time?
I mean,
I just feel like that'll become an instantly popular place for people to park
yeah,
and stage for hikes.
yeah. We're just tight on space up there. I don't know, whatever you want to do.
It feels like there should be one there when it's complete. And
Yeah.
if the question is when it's gonna be complete and we can prepay for it, get today's costs.
Yeah, so I'll just give you an update on that project now. So Friday and Saturday, they paved the remainder of the subdivision and then about half of the emergency access or secondary access road.
The bottom half or the upper half?
The upper half. So the bottom half doesn't have curb and gutter yet. The gas company was a big issue holding the project up. Because they had to run the gas line clear down and connect to the cove. That finally finished up. They were able to get part of the curb in, but I don't think the rest of that will be finished until spring.
Yeah.
So they'll be there a little bit longer.
Predictable. Okay.
But it looks good. The road part of it, and then they're working on the
Pavement looks good. The rest of it looks kind of.
they're
sore
working
thumb.
on that and
I'll make a motion,
presentation.
and I'll do it just because of Shane's concerned about the storage of it. I move to approve the proposal from Smith Steelworks to provide 3 additional trail kiosk signs in the amount of $26,949.
Okay. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
I have a question.
Motion made by Jason Thielen, seconded by Lon Lott. Lon?
Are we installing these then? Like
Uh-huh.
we've done the others?
Yep.
Okay.
Giddy up.
And that the costs for materials to install it is just insignificant.
It's some pipe or sonotubes and concrete and some labor to dig the hole. So
Okay.
yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jessica, Carla?
Oh, aye.
Oh, I,
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Good deal. We're moved through the agenda. Let's get to staff reports real quickly. Chief Patton, what you got?
Haven't lost any concrete foundations?
No. Knock on wood, it's been nice to get through the fire season without anything major here.
Yeah, I mean, when the Utopia guy was talking about putting cameras in and they haven't had a fire in 2 years and down south where
Woodland Hills.
Woodland Hills, we've done the same here, so.
Yeah.
I think we've made it
Yeah,
with the weather and everything. So,
it's terrific. Really glad to have that happen.
Springville had an ugly crap.
And we'll see you in the morning at the meeting.
yes, you will.
All right. Austin?
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay. Craig?
I don't remember if 2 weeks ago we informed you that Blue Bison has appealed the decision to the Supreme Court. I couldn't remember if we'd done that or not. There is a process by which the Supreme Court can keep it or send it back to the Court of Appeals for their final determination. Hiram in our office, clerk for the Supreme Court, realizing that the Baker case that is kind of the seminal case in this area was rendered by the Court of Appeals. Hiram's guessing that the Supreme Court won't send it back, but if they choose to hear it, they'll keep it. But that's only a guess based on his experience.
When will we know?
Forever.
Okay. That's okay.
The court, we got a case, one of my partners got a case that's set for trial. I think it's 4 years from now.
Wow.
It is
Okay.
ugly.
So once it's scheduled, it's still way out.
Well, my son, got appointed to the bench. He started yesterday. He held court from his bedroom office down in
Wow.
his house. Nobody's going to the courthouse.
Not quite the vision everybody has of the Supreme.
Oh, they've got a background. They got a background and all this crap that they put in. It was kind of hilarious since they're moving, but whatever.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Bonnie, do you have anything for us?
The council will need to certify the
Right.
election on Tuesday, the 16th.
Okay.
And we were talking about maybe holding a Zoom meeting. And we just need 3 council members
Need a
to be there to certify it.
Okay.
We'll have to have the anchor location open to the public. I don't know who would want to
Yeah,
come
that's fine.
just for
I
that.
I can run down.
But we can, somebody can be here. I mean, we can
Yeah.
have it at noon if we have the results and do a 5-minute Zoom meeting at noon. We just need to publicly notice the meeting.
Okay,
We should have the results on Friday.
on Friday. So, and it has to be on Tuesday, or could it be another day? Okay. So is anybody opposed to having that meeting in the middle of the day? Could everybody zoom in the middle of
It
the
could
day?
be 8 o'clock in the morning. It literally will be a 5-minute meeting.
I can't do 8 because I've got another commitment, but I could do 9.
Or
Or
can we do before 8? Why don't
Yeah.
we just do it early and do it first thing in the morning?
Yeah, we can do 7.
No, don't do 7 o'clock in the morning. It's a public meeting
Okay.
to take a
true.
vote.
Okay,
That
then
sets,
noon.
that sets a really ugly precedent.
Okay, anybody object to noon? Okay, noon it is next Tuesday. Do you want to set out a calendar invite and get her going?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and public notice it with the other switch of the meetings
Okay.
from the 23rd to the 30th.
Great. Thanks, Bonnie. Anything else? Okay. Thanks for all your work during the election and leading up to it. Shane,
Okay, I know some of us got an email today from the chamber. There's Utah County Business Summit tomorrow with our membership in the chamber. We have 2 seats there. Is
yeah, I was
anybody
actually gonna announce
planning
that too.
to go?
I can't go. Is there anybody who can or would like to go? I know that our 2 council members online are out of town.
What is it?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow,
It's a luncheon at noon is it in American Fork at the reception center?
I think so. I can, if somebody's interested, you have to pre-register. I don't know if that. Let me see.
It's tough because those are in the middle of the day and middle of the workday for a lot of people.
Yeah, I can't, unfortunately.
So it sounds like probably nobody can go anyway, so I won't take the
think
time
so.
to find
Yeah.
the details. Okay.
Yeah.
Cover the Lone Peak meeting tomorrow morning. We had the fall cleanup last Saturday. There was a little bit of a mix up. The bins got put in the north parking lot of Burgess Park instead of the south one, and there were some baseball games and pickleball and things. But
Home run if you can hit the.
I don't know how that happened because we gave them a map before and thought we don't need to give them one this time, but evidently we need to give them one next time.
We overestimated.
So, but it was still, from what I understand, a success. The trucks were round tripping all day and hauled off a lot of garbage.
That's
So,
great.
I have not walked the entire trail, but I've walked part of the new trail in Lambert Park. It looks good to me.
Yeah, I've got some feedback on that from some residents.
Yeah. So I don't know. They're doing what was approved, so
Me
I don't know
too.
what we.
Yeah, yeah.
If-
I don't think I realized that it would require so much vegetation removal and such a wide swath. And it's kind of upset a couple of people who have used it just for foot traffic. They walk the trails, but they like feeling like they're
Mhm.
in a trail as opposed to out in a wide swath.
And it's what, 6 feet wide, maybe?
Yeah, but I think they cleared more than 6 feet in some areas.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, I haven't laid eyes on it. I don't know if anybody else has, but I'm told by one of our hikers that they just obliterated a bunch of trees, and I don't know how accurate that is. I haven't seen it, but that was the sense that she had when she called me.
And I heard the same, yeah, but
Yeah,
I haven't seen it.
I'd like us to be as conservative as possible. But I'm not doing the work.
Yeah. Okay, and then I told the council about, that we were gonna apply, or I asked if we could, and you said yes. This scholarship for a kind of an intern. Anyway, it's called the Jim Reams Scholarship. Jim Reams was the city manager for Orem, and he died of a heart attack, like 55 years old or something. I guess he's a real hardworking city manager and well respected. Anyway, they put this scholarship together in honor of him. Anyway, we applied for that and got it.
Oh, cool, nice.
It's like five grand.
That's great.
So we'll advertise for that, and I hope to get somebody started, like a MPA student, like first of the year, to help with some budget stuff and
a great-
hopefully relieve a little pressure.
Yeah, that's a great farm system too for finding our next city
Yeah.
employee. maybe.
Yeah, so we just found out last Friday at the city managers conference about this. So
That's great news.
anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you. Lon, did you have anything? I have just 4 quick items. First of all, I'd like to publicly thank those who ran for office in our election and hope that those who didn't run, or thought about it, will think better next time and jump in the race. Disappointing to see the piece of illiteracy that came out in the mail right before the election. It was really disappointing to see that that happened in our city again. I hope that the results of the election will discourage it from happening in the future, because it doesn't do us any good to have negativity out there. But I hope that it also doesn't take away from the hard work that those who ran put in to the election, those who won and those who didn't win. They're all wonderful, respectable citizens of our community, and I hope that nobody is discouraged by some of the negativity that went out there. But publicly, I'd like to thank those who ran and congratulate those who won, and encourage those who didn't to continue to remain involved in the city. And hopefully that will happen. Secondly, have we had Bonnie, do we have a picture of this council?
Yes.
We do. Okay. I
It's
couldn't
on the
remember. Is it?
TV in the lobby.
Oh, it is? Okay, good. Okay, great. So we have one that'll be on the wall. Okay, good deal. Good. Number 3 was really related to the trail. I got a phone call or a message from, I'm not sure if she wants to be named or not, but I see her in the park frequently, and she's always on foot. And she was really distraught over how that trail was carved out. And I want to be careful, because I don't want to criticize those who are working hard on the trails. But it did create a question in my mind. I know we approved of the width of the trail, but how regularly is the trail committee in touch with the city? And where is the approval process when we're not seeing it at the council level? How is that happening? How are they getting their direction?
Well, the alignment's really has been left in their hands. So we haven't went out and spent a bunch of money on, creating a detailed grading plan or anything like that. It's they use grades and things like that. That's how all the trails in the city have been built.
Okay, so and the other feedback I received recently is from a mountain biker who said, why are we dumbing down all of our trails? So we removed a lot of obstacles, removed a lot of rocks and things that were, number 1, fun for the riders, but 2, help preserve the trails. I've been fighting with somebody who keeps removing a big rock, and I keep putting it back in place and they keep taking it out. But the reality is it holds the trail intact when it's there. And without it, when water comes through, it erodes it a lot more quickly and creates puddles and washouts. So I think we need to be focused on those things of preserving the trails in their natural state, as opposed to removing the obstacles and creating more erosion. Lastly, oh no, that's it, because I was going to talk about the chamber luncheon. So I'm done.
Okay, from what I read, damaging a mailbox is punishable, is a federal crime, punishable up to 3 years or $250,000 and or something. So maybe if I read correctly. Anyway, the other thing is, and I know we're over time, but the other day there was a home builder that came in early in the dark, and it was a concrete delivery, heavy, loud equipment, and they claimed they had permission from the city. I don't know what the facts are to come in.
I can tell you.
Okay.
So our construction noise ordinance does give the city administrator the latitude to approve in special circumstances. They did go through the process. I feel a little sorry for contractors right now, people trying to build a home, because it's so hard to get concrete. And I know that because we've had trouble on our own projects trying to get concrete. So I did approve that one, and these are the stipulations I gave them. It was for 4:30 in the morning. I said no backup alarms on the trucks. You need to have a spotter back there instead of a backup alarm. I don't know I hope that happened. I made it solid clear that that was a stipulation. And I told them that they had to go talk to all the surrounding neighbors, whether the neighbors liked them or not, and inform them what was going on and why. And those are the two conditions. I said, if this doesn't work, it won't happen again.
Yeah.
So that's the first request I've had like that. But like I said, I know how tough it is to get concrete, and I don't know. A couple other times we've had to do that. One was on a city project. We started at like 2 o'clock in the morning when we built the Canyon Crest Bridge. And
So did this one actually happen at 4 a.m?
I never heard a complaint or anything,
I'm
so.
sure it was by 5:30 anyway. You know, and I don't know if there was backup alarms, probably not, but it was loud, probably woke up the neighborhood.
Yeah, that
but-
diesel engine and the thing
Yeah,
turning around.
yeah, so anyway, just,
So that's what I did. I double checked the orders to make sure if I made the wrong call, let me know.
All right.
that's all I had, thanks.
We're in illegal territory, so I don't have anything.
Yeah. We have broken the law, sorry. Okay, take a motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, Jessica and Carla.
Oh,
Thank you.
nothing. Yeah, no, let's, yeah,
Okay,
I adjourn.
have a great time, ladies.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.